Chapter 1. The Gathering Storm. The first flakes descended with a quiet treachery as Claire Winters heaved the final cord of firewood onto the covered porch of Whispering Pines Lodge. She straightened, wincing as her lower back protested, and watched her breath form ghost-like plumes in the biting air. The snow wasn't falling in the gentle, dreamy way that postcards depicted. These were small, sharp crystals that stung exposed skin and accumulated with alarming efficiency. A hunter's snow, deliberate and merciless. 3 days ahead of schedule. Claire pulled her worn leather glove off with her teeth and checked her watch, 2:17 p.m. The guests weren't due to arrive for another 4 hours. Plenty of time to finish provisioning the cabin and descend the mountain before the roads transform from merely dangerous to impassable. Or so she told herself. She stomped her boots against the rough-hewn welcome mat, dislodging clumps of snow that had already collected in the deep treads. The oak door resisted before yielding with a groan that reminded Claire of her grandfather's complaints about his arthritic knee inside. Warmth from the fire she'd kindled that morning still clung to the air, the massive stone fireplace dominating the great room like an ancient monument. To call this place a cabin was like calling a great white shark just a fish. From the exterior, Whispering Pines resembled a rustic mountain retreat, all weathered timber and wisps of smoke curling from riverstone chimneys that had witnessed half a century of Montana winters. Step inside, however, and the pretense of simplicity evaporated. Hand-knotted Persian rugs worth more than Claire's annual income softened footfalls across wide plank pine floors, Italian leather furniture, and butter-soft cognac-created conversation areas throughout the cavernous great room. The kitchen would make professional chefs weep. Wolf range, sub-zero refrigerator, marble countertops that stretched like a landlocked sea-old money playing at roughing it, with a price tag of $2,000 per night to prove it. Claire moved with methodical precision through her checklist, the ritual calming her growing unease about the weather. She counted fresh towels, 36, plush and monogrammed, checked expiration dates on emergency supplies, all current, tested the satellite phone, functional for now, and stocked the refrigerator with the specialty items requested by each guest. Almond milk for the Broadway actress, craft beer for the doctor, imported cheese for the siblings who'd paid extra for the wine pairing with each dinner. Control what you can control. The mantra had kept her functioning these past 18 months, since the night that ended her law enforcement career and started her self-imposed exile into wilderness guiding. When her phone chimed with an alert, she was in the temperature-controlled cellar, inventorying bottles of wine that cost more than a week's salary from her former job as deputy sheriff. It seemed absurd to care whether the 2015 Bordeaux was properly displayed when she'd once survived 3 days on beef jerky and river water after a guide rope snapped during a mountain rescue. Emergency alert, winter storm warning upgraded to blizzard. Catastrophic conditions expected, all travel discouraged. Seek shelter immediately. The timestamp, 2:46 p.m. Her phone's signal bars, already vanished.
Damn it,
Claire muttered, taking the cellar stairs 2 at a time, her hand sliding along the smooth pine banister. Outside, the transformation stole her breath more effectively than the cold. In just 30 minutes, the world had morphed from picturesque mountain scene to churning white chaos. The pines surrounding the cabin swayed dangerously, limbs heavy with accumulation, bowing before wind that careened down the mountainside with the ferocity of a freight train. Claire had witnessed Montana blizzards since childhood, measuring winters by how many times her father's police cruiser needed digging out. But this felt different. The sky had taken on that strange, yellowish-gray hue that made her think of bruises and bad omens. The barometric pressure had dropped so rapidly that her ears had popped twice in the last hour. This wasn't just bad. This was the storm old-timers still spoke of in hushed tones at Blackwater Falls' only bar, the kind that rearranged the mountain and took lives in the process. Claire calculated rapidly, facts clicking into place like bullets in a chamber. The guests would be en route already, likely past the point where cell reception failed, that notorious dead zone beginning 3 miles back at Widow's Curve. The winding access road, steep with 13 switchbacks and no guardrails in sections, would soon become a death trap. If she left now, pushed her Jeep to its limits, she might reach her small cabin in the valley before the worst hit, but that would mean abandoning 6 unprepared tourists to a blizzard that was already rewriting forecasts, as if nature had orchestrated the timing to force her hand, Headlights pierced the thickening curtain of white, crawling up the final switchback to the cabin. Too late. Claire trudged to her Jeep, now wearing a 2-inch snow hat despite being parked only 20 minutes earlier. She yanked open the door against the wind's resistance and grabbed her emergency pack. 90 pounds of survival equipment that had saved lives more than once. As she hoisted it onto her shoulder, her vehicle disappeared beneath a fresh layer of white, erased like it had never existed. A sleek black Range Rover lurched to a stop beside the now invisible Jeep, its tires spinning uselessly before the engine cut. The luxury vehicle seemed offensively out of place against the primal violence of the gathering storm. A tall man emerged, hunched against the assault. Dark hair immediately frosted white. He clutched a leather weekend bag to his chest with one hand, while the other shielded his eyes. His clothes broadcast money and city life, a wool coat that probably cost $2,000 but would be useless against prolonged exposure, leather boots better suited to boardrooms than blizzards. Yet something in his purposeful movements suggested he wasn't entirely foreign to hardship.
Whispering Pines?
He called, voice nearly stolen by the wind.
Yes,
Claire shouted back, gesturing urgently.
inside, now.
The man needed no further encouragement, crossing the distance with long strides. Claire held the door, stealing one final glance at the sky, which had darkened to the color of wet slate. The mountain was disappearing, swallowed whole by white.
Are the others behind you?
She asked as he crossed the threshold.
Others?
The man stomped snow from his boots onto the mat, creating a small puddle that would be the first of many.
I passed an SUV about 15 minutes back, moving at a crawl. Driver looked like he'd seen a ghost.
Great. 5 more unprepared tourists navigating a road that was vanishing by the minute. Claire locked the door behind them, though the gesture felt as futile as a child hiding under blankets from a monster. The man turned, snowmelt dripping from his dark hair onto a face that belonged in luxury watch advertisements. Strong jaw with the shadow of a day's stubble, straight nose, eyes the precise shade of pine resin in sunlight. The kind of handsome that made Claire immediately suspicious.
You must be the caretaker Emerson mentioned,
He said, extending his hand.
Archer Reed.
Claire ignored both the handshake and the assumption, brushing past him to drop her emergency pack on the kitchen island with a heavy thud.
Claire Winters. I'm not the caretaker. I'm a wilderness guide who was hired to stock this place and leave before the storm hit.
She pulled off her gloves, flexing fingers that had gone numb despite their protection.
The forecast was wrong.
Catastrophically wrong, it seems.
He agreed, gaze drifting to windows now rattling in their frames as the wind battered them.
Will the others make it safely?
Claire crossed to the fireplace, adding another log from the brass holder to build up heat they would desperately need. The fire hissed and sparked as if in protest.
If they don't turn back, yes, the road only leads here. But none of you will be leaving.
She used a cast iron poker to shift the logs, creating maximum exposure to oxygen.
Not for days.
Reed's expression shifted, not to panic, which she'd expected from someone wearing $400 shoes in a blizzard, but to something more calculating. His eyes narrowed slightly as he assessed the situation.
How many days are we talking about?
This system...
Claire paused, choosing her words carefully. No need to cause premature panic, but neither would she sugarcoat reality.
The pressure readings and wind patterns resemble the '78 storm. My father was sheriff then. They found cars buried under 8 feet of snow, people trapped in their vehicles for days. Some didn't make it.
You're saying we could be stuck here for a week.
Not a question. This man grasped implications quickly.
At minimum,
Claire confirmed, meeting his gaze directly.
no cell service once the storm takes out the satellite. No way down the mountain until county plows clear the access road, which won't be a priority compared to major highways and emergency routes.
Headlights appeared again through the windows, weaker now, struggling against the strengthening tempest. Claire headed for the door, grabbing her parka.
I'll help them in. You build up that fire as high as it'll go. This place has plenty of firewood, but we'll need to be smart about it. The generator has fuel for 10 days if we're conservative with electricity.
She stepped back into the storm's embrace before he could respond, the wind a physical force that nearly knocked her sideways. The snow was already 6 inches deep in places, accumulating with unnerving speed. The approaching vehicle, a rented Suburban by the looks of it, crawled the final yards to the cabin, windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the elements. 5 people emerged in varying states of distress. Claire assessed them with the automatic categorization of her former profession, filing away details that might matter for group survival. Silver-haired woman, early 60s, wearing a cashmere coat and impractical heeled boots. Designer luggage she refused to relinquish to the driver, despite the conditions carries herself with theatrical posture, spine straight, chin lifted. Wealthy, entitled, but the hands clutching her bags have a slight tremor. Margot Devereaux, most likely, the former Broadway star who'd requested the master suite with private balcony. Middle-aged man with salt and pepper beard and wire-rimmed glasses, clutching a physician's bag with white-knuckled protectiveness. Wearing a practical down parka, but city loafers moves with the efficient economy of someone accustomed to emergency rooms. Dr. Lawrence Garfield, the neurosurgeon who'd inquired about the cabin's wine cellar in 3 separate emails. Siblings in their 30s, the resemblance unmistakable. Same aquiline nose and high cheekbones, though hers were softened with expertly applied makeup. They argued, even as they stumbled through the snow, voices sharp enough to cut through the howling wind.
I told you we should have turned around at that gas station.
And I told you I wasn't missing this reservation after paying a fortune for it.
The Fontaines, James, and Eliza, who'd specified separate rooms on opposite wings of the cabin. A heavy-set older man with florid complexion breathing heavily, already showing signs of altitude stress. Expensive but practical outdoor gear that looked newly purchased Preston Whitmore. The retired banking executive who'd requested daily weather reports and asked if the property had a defibrillator. Claire herded them toward the porch, her voice raised to be heard over the storm.
Inside, quickly! Watch your step! It's slick!
As she closed the cabin door against the howling gale, sealing them all inside together, Claire felt a familiar prickle along her spine that had nothing to do with the cold, the sensation she'd experienced countless times as a deputy, the awareness that something wasn't right. Her eyes swept over the group as they shed wet outer layers and murmured complaints about the weather. Something about these people, something in their faces, triggered her dormant law enforcement instincts. A nagging sense of recognition that she couldn't immediately place. She'd seen them before. Not these exact people, perhaps, but something connected them in her memory. Something important. The fire crackled in the massive stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across walls lined with hunting trophies and vintage photographs of the region. Outside, the last light faded prematurely as the storm intensified, turning afternoon to unnatural night.
Welcome to Whispering Pines,
Claire said, surveying the 6 strangers who now depended on her for survival.
I hope you all packed for an extended stay. We're not going anywhere until this storm decides we can.
Through the frost-edged windows, the world disappeared completely into white, the mountain closing around them like a fist. Chapter 2. Shadows of the Past.
I don't suppose anyone thought to bring Monopoly,
James Fontaine said, breaking the silence that had settled after Claire's blunt assessment of their situation. He sprawled in one of the leather armchairs, boots propped on a hand-carved coffee table despite his sister's disapproving glare.
I'm afraid board games weren't on my emergency supplies list,
Claire replied, mentally calculating how much firewood they'd need to maintain comfortable temperatures throughout the night. The cabin's heating system was efficient, but if the power failed, the massive stone fireplace would become their primary heat source.
But there's a decent library in the study. Books, at least, won't require electricity.
She ran her fingers along the rough-hewn mantelpiece, feeling the grain of wood beneath her fingertips. The cabin was well built, sturdy against the elements, but even the sturdiest structures had their weaknesses like people, she supposed.
How reassuring,
Margot Devereaux said, her voice carrying the practiced projection of decades on stage. She perched on the edge of a sofa, back straight, fingers nervously twisting the pearl necklace at her throat.
Trapped in the wilderness with nothing but Hemingway and survival rations, just like my disastrous 3rd honeymoon.
The shadows from the fire danced across Margot's face, highlighting the tension around her eyes. Claire had seen that look before, the barely controlled panic of someone unaccustomed to nature's indifference. Dr. Garfield removed his glasses, polishing them with a handkerchief pulled from his breast pocket.
I'd be more concerned about medical emergencies than entertainment, Ms. Devereaux. I have a basic physician's kit, but anything serious would require evacuation, which is clearly impossible.
His clinical tone made the reality of their isolation all the more stark. Beyond the cabin's walls, the blizzard continued its assault, wind howling through the pines like a living thing, hungry and relentless.
No one's going to need evacuation,
Claire said firmly, adopting the tone she'd used to calm panicked hikers caught in sudden mountain thunderstorms.
The cabin is fully stocked with food, medical supplies, and enough amenities to keep us comfortable until the roads clear. We just need to be patient and practical.
She didn't add that patience was often the first casualty of confinement. She'd seen reasonable people turn on each other after just days of unexpected proximity. The human mind had ways of twisting in on itself when faced with limitations. Archer Reed had positioned himself by the window, one shoulder against the frame, watching the storm's fury with quiet intensity. The snow had turned the glass into a canvas of swirling white, occasionally illuminated by the distant flash of lightning. He turned at Claire's words, his gaze finding hers across the room with unsettling precision.
Ms. Winters is right. I've been through Montana blizzards before. Panic helps no one.
The calm confidence in his voice caught Claire off guard. His words carried the weight of experience, not the hollow reassurance of someone trying to appear brave. When his eyes met hers, something warm unfurled in her chest, surprising her with its intensity.
Easy for you to say,
Eliza Fontaine muttered, checking her phone again, though Claire had already explained there would be no service. Her manicured nails tapped an impatient rhythm against the screen.
Some of us have actual responsibilities waiting. Board meetings, client presentations.
All of which will still be there when we get out.
Preston Whitmore said, lowering himself carefully onto a leather ottoman that creaked beneath his weight. Beads of sweat dotted his forehead despite the room's chill.
No sense fretting about what can't be changed. Been in banking 40 years. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that some storms just have to be weathered.
Claire took advantage of the momentary calm to retrieve her emergency pack from where she'd left it in the kitchen. The wooden floorboards whispered beneath her feet as she moved, each step a soft confession in the quiet room. She was acutely aware of Archer's gaze following her movements. There was something in the way he watched her, not the entitled appraisal she'd received from wealthy clients before, but something more careful, as if he were trying to read a story written in the lines of her body.
I'm going to check the generator,
She announced.
and make sure all exterior doors are properly secured. Mr. Reed, would you mind building up the fire? There's more wood on the covered porch if needed.
Archer, please.
He said, pushing away from the window with fluid grace. The firelight caught in his dark hair, turning the edges to copper.
And I'd be happy to handle the fire.
Their fingers brushed as Claire handed him the wrought iron poker, a brief contact that sent heat racing up her arm and settling low in her stomach. His eyes, the color of pine resin in sunlight, held hers a moment longer than necessary. Claire felt herself being drawn into their warmth, like stepping from shadow into a patch of unexpected sunlight.
Thank you,
She murmured, drawing her hand back too quickly, betraying her reaction. A slight smile crossed his face, knowing, intimate, as though he'd recognized something in her that she'd thought well hidden.
My pleasure.
Two simple words that somehow carried a promise. Claire turned away, conscious of the warmth in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the growing fire. Even as she moved toward the door, she could feel the lingering imprint of his touch on her skin, like a secret, told in a language only her body understood. Claire retreated to the utility room where the backup generator hummed reassuringly. She knelt beside her pack, unzipping the main compartment to inventory the contents. Habit more than necessity, a ritual that helped focus her thoughts, but as she reached inside, her fingers encountered unfamiliar space. The specialized first aid kit was gone. So was the satellite beacon, equipment that would be unrecognizable to most people but invaluable in a true emergency. "Damn it!" she whispered, running her hands through every pocket, hoping she'd simply misplaced them. But Claire never misplaced equipment, not once in 12 years of guiding. She sat back on her heels, mind racing. No one had been alone with her pack except... A floorboard creaked behind her.
Everything all right?
Archer stood in the doorway, one hand braced against the frame, his tall figure backlit by the hallway lights. In silhouette, he seemed larger somehow, more imposing. Claire zipped the pack closed with deliberate casualness.
Fine. Just double-checking supplies.
You seem concerned.
His voice was like warm honey poured over granite, smooth, inviting, yet with an unyielding core. His perception was too acute for comfort. Claire stood, lifting the pack with her.
Professional habit. I guide people through wilderness for a living. Preparation matters.
And now you're guiding 6 strangers through an unexpected blizzard.
His smile didn't quite reach his eyes.
Lucky for us.
The dim utility room light cast half his face in shadow, making him impossible to read. Was there a threat buried in those words?
Lucky isn't the word I'd use.
Claire stepped past him, careful not to brush against his body in the narrow doorway. Even so, she caught the scent of him, cedar and something darker, like wet earth after rain. The proximity sent an unwanted flutter through her chest. Back in the great room, tension had visibly thickened. Margot Devereaux was emptying the contents of her designer luggage onto a couch, tossing silk blouses and cashmere sweaters with increasing agitation.
It's gone.
She announced as Claire entered.
My satellite phone. I always keep it in the inside pocket of my Vuitton weekender, always, and now it's missing.
The room fell silent except for the crackling fire and the relentless howl of wind. Claire felt the weight of Archer's presence as he came to stand slightly behind her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. His breath stirred the fine hairs at the nape of her neck, sending a ripple of awareness down her spine.
Are you sure you packed it?
Dr. Garfield asked, his tone suggesting he was accustomed to hysterical patients. He'd taken up residence in a wingback chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin.
Of course I packed it.
Margot snapped. Her hands trembled as she continued to rifle through her belongings.
I've traveled to remote locations for film shoots often enough to know better than to rely on cell service. That phone has coverage anywhere on the planet.
Claire set her pack down, carefully keeping her expression neutral despite the alarm bells ringing in her mind.
When did you last see it?
This morning, at my hotel in Missoula, I made a call to my agent before checking out.
Margot looked accusingly around the room.
Which means someone here has taken it.
That's quite an accusation,
Preston said mildly, though his complexion had darkened to a concerning shade of red. The firelight deepened the flush, making him look feverish.
Perhaps you simply misplaced it.
I don't misplace $10,000 communication devices,
Margot retorted.
especially not during natural disasters.
The siblings exchanged a look Claire couldn't interpret. James's fingers drummed restlessly on the arm of his chair, while Eliza's posture had gone rigid, defensive. Claire stepped between Margot and the others, hands raised in a calming gesture.
Let's not jump to conclusions. We'll search thoroughly. Things get moved around during travel, especially in a rush to escape bad weather.
What about your phone, Ms. Winters?
James Fontaine asked, eyes narrowing.
Surely a wilderness guide has reliable communication equipment.
The question carried an undercurrent of suspicion that made Claire's spine stiffen.
My satellite phone is in my vehicle,
She answered truthfully, though she omitted mentioning the missing beacon from her pack. No need to escalate tensions further.
but it might as well be on the moon right now. Nobody's retrieving anything from outside until this storm passes. Convenient,
Eliza muttered, crossing her arms over her chest. When Claire felt Archer watching her, his gaze heavy between her shoulder blades. When she turned, he was arranging logs in the fireplace, his movements precise and practiced, not the fumbling efforts of someone accustomed to gas fireplaces and central heating. The flames cast his profile in stark relief, highlighting the strong line of his jaw, the slight furrow of concentration between his brows. Her gaze traced the curve of his mouth, lingered there a moment too long.
We should inventory what food and supplies we have,
He suggested, straightening up, as flames caught and climbed eagerly up the dry wood.
Establish some rationing guidelines in case we're here longer than anticipated.
The kitchen's fully stocked,
Claire replied.
fresh food for a week, plus freeze-dried backups that could last a month. Water shouldn't be an issue. The well is deep, and the pipes are insulated and heat-traced.
Still, a list would provide reassurance.
Archer pressed, holding her gaze with quiet insistence. His eyes reflected the dancing flames, golden flecks illuminating their brown depths.
People manage uncertainty better when they understand their resources.
The statement was so aligned with Claire's own thinking that she found herself nodding agreement despite her suspicion.
I'll get started on it.
I'll help.
He offered, falling into step beside her as she moved toward the kitchen. The brush of his arm against hers sent a whisper of awareness through her body, unwelcome but undeniable. His fingers grazed the small of her back as he guided her around a corner, the brief contact burning through the layers of her clothing. The others remained in the great room, Margot still frantically searching her luggage, while the siblings bickered in hushed tones about whose fault it was they hadn't turned back. When the weather alert came through, Preston had closed his eyes, his breathing heavy as though the altitude and stress were taking their toll. Only Dr. Garfield seemed truly calm, his attention fixed on a leather-bound book pulled from the cabin's shelves. In the kitchen, Claire pulled a notepad from a drawer and began listing supplies. The room felt smaller with Archer in it, as if his presence compressed the available space. He moved with surprising familiarity, opening correct cabinets on the first try, cataloging their contents with efficient precision.
You've been here before,
Claire said. Not a question, but an observation. Her pen paused above the paper, waiting. Archer paused, a can of beans in his hand.
What makes you say that?
His tone was light, curious, but his eyes had sharpened.
You knew where to find things. The cabin layout doesn't surprise you.
She kept her voice even, casual, though her heart had picked up its pace. He set the can down carefully.
Montana cabins tend to follow similar designs. I've stayed in my share over the years.
Not cabins like Whispering Pines.
Claire leaned against the counter, arms crossed.
This place is one of a kind.
The kitchen light caught the curve of his smile, rendering it both charming and obscurely threatening.
Perhaps I'm just observant.
He suggested, the ghost of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth.
A trait we seem to share, Ms. Winters.
Claire,
She corrected automatically, annoyed at herself for the concession.
Claire,
He repeated, her name somehow transformed in his mouth into something more intimate than it had any right to be. Each syllable lingered in the air between them, charged with unspoken meaning. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the wood smoke clinging to his sweater and see the faint scar above his right eyebrow.
I think we'd work better as allies than adversaries given our situation.
The proximity sent her pulse skittering, a reaction she resented. She'd faced down mountain lions with less internal commotion.
that depends on whether we have the same goals.
Survival isn't goal enough.
His voice dropped lower, a private rumble meant only for her ears. A sudden creak from within the walls interrupted whatever Claire might have replied, a long, drawn-out groan of timber that sounded almost like a whisper. Both their heads turned toward the sound.
Old buildings talk,
Archer said, but his casual tone seemed forced.
especially in extreme weather.
The sound came again, not the normal settling of a structure under stress, but something more purposeful, almost articulated, like someone dragging something heavy through a hidden space.
It's just the wind finding its way between the log,
Claire said, more to convince herself than him. She'd spent enough nights in the wilderness to recognize the usual symphony of creaks and groans that accompanied wild places. This was different,
Of course.
Archer agreed, though his eyes remained fixed on the wall. He turned back to her after a moment, his expression unreadable.
You know, for someone who claims to be just a wilderness guide who happened to get trapped here, you seem remarkably territorial about this place.
Heat flared in Claire's cheeks.
I know these mountains. I've guided in them my entire adult life. If that makes me territorial, so be it.
There's knowing a place.
Archer said softly.
And then there's belonging to it. You and Whispering Pines seem entangled in ways that go beyond professional familiarity.
His fingertips brushed the countertop, inching toward her hand until they were almost touching. Claire found herself unable to move, caught in the magnetic field between rejection and desire. The observation hit too close to truths Claire couldn't share, with this stranger, regardless of how perceptive his gaze or how his proximity sent unwelcome warmth curling through her body.
You're reading too much into things, Mr. Reed.
She picked up the notepad, putting space between them.
Let's finish this inventory.
Archer.
He reminded her, his voice wrapping around the correction like a caress.
And I rarely read situations incorrectly, Claire.
The way he studied her face made her feel exposed, as though he could see past her careful defenses to the secrets beneath. His eyes dropped briefly to her lips, lingering there with unmistakable interest that stirred an answering heat low in her belly. Before she could respond, a scream tore through the cabin, high-pitched and terrified. They both raced back to the great room where Margot stood frozen, pointing at a piece of paper in her hand. Her face had drained of all color, leaving her rouge in stark contrast to her pallor.
What happened?
Claire demanded, automatically positioning herself between the actress and potential danger.
This was in my suitcase.
Margot thrust the paper forward, her hand trembling so violently the page fluttered like a wounded bird.
Hidden inside my toiletry bag.
Claire took it carefully, a note crafted from letters cut from magazines and newspapers pasted onto plain white paper. The message stark and unmistakable. Some sins can't be buried. The crude collage seemed to pulse in her hands, each mismatched letter carrying a threat that transcended the simple message. Claire felt Archer move closer to her side, reading over her shoulder, his breath warm against her neck.
Is this someone's idea of a joke?
Claire looked around at the group, each face registering shock or an impressive facsimile of it.
Not mine,
James Fontaine said quickly, raising his hands.
I don't even know any of you people.
Dr. Garfield stood, setting his book aside.
This is childish and inappropriate. We're already in a stressful situation without adding melodrama.
Melodrama?
Margot's voice rose sharply.
Someone deliberately placed this threat in my personal belongings.
Her perfectly manicured hands fluttered to her throat, pressing against her pearls as if to confirm they were still there. The gesture seemed both vulnerable and performative. But then, Claire wondered, how much of an actress's fear would look genuine to strangers?
What does it mean?
Preston asked, his complexion now alarmingly pale. Chapter 3, Secrets in the Attic. Claire kept her breathing steady as she passed the crude note to Archer, their fingers brushing momentarily. The brief contact sent an unexpected warmth through her palm that traveled up her arm. She pulled away quickly, unsettled by her body's betrayal. These moments of weakness were becoming harder to ignore around him.
This is
Preston Whitmore swallowed hard, his jowls quivering with the effort.
beyond inappropriate. It's threatening.
Which is precisely why we need to handle this rationally,
Claire said, adopting the measured tone she'd used during crisis negotiations. The familiar rhythm of investigation helped mask the flutter in her chest whenever Archer's gaze found hers.
First, we need to establish a timeline. Margot, when did you last check your toiletry bag?
The actress pressed a trembling hand to her forehead.
This morning at the hotel, I took out my moisturizer before checkout.
And no one's touched your luggage since arriving here?
Claire asked, mentally cataloging the window of opportunity while fighting the distracting awareness of Archer standing close enough that she could catch the faint scent of his cologne, sandalwood, and something distinctly him.
Of course not.
Margot's voice rose sharply.
It was in my room until I unpacked just now.
Dr. Garfield cleared his throat.
I hate to state the obvious, but whoever took Ms. Devereaux's satellite phone likely left this message.
Claire felt Archer's eyes on her, assessing, calculating. She met his gaze directly, refusing to flinch under his scrutiny. His expression remained unreadable, but something passed between them. An unspoken challenge, or perhaps recognition. His dark eyes held hers for a beat too long, causing her to look away first, a sensation like warm honey spreading in her chest.
We should search the cabin,
James suggested, straightening his shoulders as though preparing for battle.
Find the phone, and whoever's playing these sick games.
And risk destroying potential evidence?
Eliza countered, her sharp tone belying the fear visible in her tight posture.
We should wait for authorities. There are no authorities coming.
Claire reminded them quietly.
Not until the storm passes. We're on our own.
The words settled heavily in the room, emphasized by a particularly violent gust of wind that sent snow hissing against the windows. The glass panes shuddered, the sound like fingernails scratching at the barrier between them and the merciless cold beyond.
I'd like to check something,
Claire said after a moment.
Alone. That's convenient,
Eliza muttered, wrapping her cashmere cardigan tighter around her slender frame.
I'll go with you,
Archer offered, his deep voice cutting through the growing tension. It wasn't a request, but a statement of intent. The rich timbre of his voice sent a treacherous ripple down Claire's spine, a feeling she tried desperately to ignore. She wanted to refuse, to protect the privacy of her investigation, but something in his steady gaze made her nod once, curtly.
Fine. The rest of you, stay together. Safety in numbers.
As they left the great room, Claire could feel the weight of suspicion following them like a shadow. She led Archer through the cabin's winding hallways, past closed bedroom doors, to a narrow staircase hidden behind a decorative panel in the upstairs corridor. Their footsteps synchronized naturally, an unnerving harmony that made her pulse quicken.
Hidden passages,
Archer murmured, close enough that his breath stirred the fine hairs at the nape of her neck.
Appropriate for a mystery, wouldn't you say?
The Claire ignored the comment, focusing instead on climbing the steep stairs that led to the attic. The wood creaked beneath their weight, announcing their presence to the darkness above. She was acutely conscious of Archer behind her, his presence solid and strangely comforting despite her misgivings. His proximity made her skin tingle with an awareness that was becoming harder to dismiss, with each passing hour trapped in this snowbound cabin. The attic stretched the length of the cabin, its ceiling following the sharp angles of the roof. Dust motes danced in the beam of Claire's flashlight, swirling like snow in miniature. As they moved through the space, old furniture draped in sheets created misshapen silhouettes that loomed in the periphery of their vision.
What exactly are we looking for?
Archer asked, his voice hushed in the close space. In the dim light, his features seemed softened, less guarded than before. Claire moved with purpose toward the far corner.
My father used to say that buildings hold on to things, memories, secrets, especially the parts people rarely visit.
Your father sounds like a wise man.
Something in Archer's tone made Claire glance back at him. His expression was thoughtful, almost wistful, and for a moment he looked younger, more vulnerable.
He was the county sheriff for 20 years,
she said, offering the information like a small peace offering.
Taught me to look where others don't.
Claire knelt beside a section of floorboards that appeared identical to the rest, but which she knew concealed a small storage space. Her fingers traced the almost invisible seam until she found the depression that served as a handle. The familiar action grounded her, momentarily distracting her from the unexpected tension that had been building between them since that first accidental touch.
Help me with this,
she instructed, and Archer knelt beside her, their shoulders touching as they worked to lift the hidden panel. His proximity sent another unwanted flutter through her chest, the same reaction she'd experienced in the kitchen, only stronger now in the intimate confines of the attic. His cologne mixed with the scent of old wood and dust, creating a heady combination that made Claire's head swim slightly. The compartment beneath the floorboards was shallow, but wider than it appeared from the outside. Claire's flashlight beam revealed a wooden box, roughly the size of a shoebox, its surface covered with a fine layer of dust.
That doesn't look like it belongs to the cabin's current owners,
Archer observed, reaching past her to lift it carefully from its hiding place. His arm brushed against hers, and Claire found herself acutely aware of the solid warmth of his body beside hers in the chilly attic.
It doesn't,
she agreed, taking the box from him. Their fingers touched again, lingering for a heartbeat longer than necessary. Claire felt heat rise to her cheeks and was grateful for the dim lighting. His touch sent tiny electric currents through her skin, awakening sensations she had long suppressed. The box was simple pine, unvarnished and unmarked. No lock secured its contents. The lid lifted easily when Claire applied gentle pressure. Inside, Nestled in yellowed tissue paper lay a stack of photographs. Claire lifted them carefully, angling them toward the flashlight beam. The first showed a younger version of Margot Devereaux, recognizable despite the 30 years that had passed, standing in front of a rustic building with a sign reading Blackwater Falls General Store. Her signature red lipstick was unmistakable, as was the haughty tilt of her chin.
That's not possible,
Archer murmured, leaning closer to examine the image. His cheek was inches from Claire's, his stubble catching the light.
Blackwater Falls is 20 miles from here.
The next town over,
Claire confirmed, moving to the second photograph, trying to ignore the warmth of his breath on her cheek. This one showed Dr. Garfield, his hair still dark, standing beside a hospital bed. The patient's face was obscured, but the location was clear from the sign visible through a window. Blackwater Falls Medical Center. The third photograph showed a young couple that Claire recognized as James and Eliza Fontaine, teenagers then, standing beside a tall man who resembled them enough to be their father. They were posed in front of a construction site, a half-built structure rising behind them. The fourth revealed Preston Whitmore, significantly trimmer but with the same serious expression, shaking hands with a man whose face had been scratched out of the picture with what appeared to be a sharp object. Claire's hands trembled slightly as she turned to the final photograph. It showed a young boy, perhaps 8 years old, with familiar dark hair and eyes that even then seemed to see too much. He stood beside a beautiful woman, whose features echoed his own, her arm protectively around his shoulders. Archer. Claire looked up at him, questions forming on her lips, but the words died as she saw his expression. The color had drained from his face, his eyes fixed on the photograph with an intensity that bordered on physical pain. In that moment, she saw beyond his carefully constructed walls to the wounded soul beneath, and something inside her reached out instinctively.
Where did you find these?
He asked hoarsely.
I didn't.
Claire said quietly.
They were already here.
She flipped the photograph over. On the back, written in faded blue ink, Catherine and Archer Reed, Blackwater Falls Summer Festival, 1992.
This is impossible,
Archer whispered, taking the photograph with trembling fingers.
These should have been destroyed decades ago.
You recognize this woman?
Claire asked, though she already knew the answer from his reaction.
My Aunt Catherine.
He confirmed, his voice rough with emotion.
She died that summer.
His eyes, when they met Claire's, were filled with a raw pain that made her heart constrict. The pieces clicked into place in Claire's mind with terrible clarity. 1992. Blackwater Falls, Catherine Reed, the entries in her father's journal.
An accident at the cabin,
she murmured, the words escaping before she could stop them. Archer's head snapped up, his eyes suddenly sharp with suspicion.
How do you know about that?
Before Claire could answer, a particularly violent gust of wind sent something heavy crashing against the attic window. They both startled, instinctively moving closer together in the darkness. For a moment, they remained frozen, hearts racing in tandem, close enough that Claire could feel the heat radiating from Archer's body. His hand had somehow found hers in the darkness, strong fingers intertwined with her own. The contact should have made her pull away, but instead she found herself drawing comfort from his touch. His palm was warm against hers, calloused in places that spoke of a life of physical work, so different from her own smooth hands.
We need to show these to the others,
Claire said at last, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. Archer nodded, but made no move to release her hand.
This explains the note,
he said.
Someone knows why we're all here.
But we're not all here by choice,
Claire countered, thinking of her own accidental presence.
I was just stocking the cabin when the storm hit.
Archer's eyes, illuminated by the flashlight's glow, studied her face with unsettling intensity.
Are you certain about that, Claire? No connection to Blackwater Falls? To 1992?
His gaze traveled over her features, as if memorizing each curve and plane. She wanted to deny it, to maintain the professional distance she'd cultivated since her arrival, but the truth hung between them like a physical presence, heavy and inescapable.
Thomas Winters,
she admitted quietly.
The sheriff who investigated your aunt's death. He was my father.
Understanding dawned in Archer's eyes, followed by something Claire couldn't quite identify. Pain, perhaps, or resignation. His thumb traced a gentle circle on the back of her hand, the gesture at odds with the tension in his shoulders.
Then we're both pawns in someone else's game,
he said softly. His voice held a tenderness that surprised her, making her heart flutter in a way she hadn't experienced in years. Before Claire could respond, the attic door slammed shut with devastating finality. The sound echoed through the space, followed by the unmistakable click of a lock engaging. They were trapped. Claire was on her feet instantly, Archer close behind her as they rushed to the door. The old wood refused to budge despite their combined efforts, the lock holding firm against their pressure. Their bodies pressed together as they pushed, the physical contact sending unwanted sparks through Claire's nerve endings even as fear gripped her heart.
Someone's out there,
Claire hissed, pressing her ear to the door. Faint footsteps retreated down the stairs, too light to identify. The wood was cold against her cheek, a stark contrast to the warmth emanating from Archer beside her.
We're locked in,
Archer confirmed, his voice surprisingly calm. He turned to face her, his expression resolute in the beam of the flashlight.
But we have what they don't want us to have.
He gestured to the photograph still clutched in Claire's hand.
Evidence that none of us are here by accident.
Claire looked down at the images, her mind racing.
Everyone in these photos is currently in this cabin,
she said slowly.
30 years later, in the middle of a historic blizzard, the statistical probability of that happening by chance
is 0.
Archer finished for her. His eyes met hers, and something electric passed between them, a shared understanding that transcended words. His gaze dropped briefly to her lips, then back to her eyes, making her breath catch in her throat. For the first time since arriving at Whispering Pines, Claire felt the stirring of something beyond suspicion. Standing in the dusty attic with a man who should have been a stranger but somehow wasn't, surrounded by evidence of a past neither of them fully understood, she felt an unexpected connection forming. Their lives had been intertwined long before they'd ever met, their paths converging at this point through circumstances neither could have predicted. Archer seemed to sense her thoughts, his expression softening as he reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face. The gesture was gentle, intimate in a way that should have made Claire step back. Instead, she found herself leaning slightly into his touch, drawn by a magnetism she couldn't explain and didn't want to analyze. His fingertips lingered on her cheek, warm and tender against her skin.
We'll find a way out,
he promised, his voice low and reassuring.
And then we'll get answers.
The rich depth of his voice wrapped around her like velvet, soothing, yet exhilarating. Claire nodded, allowing herself this brief moment of alliance before the reality of their situation reasserted itself. She moved away, breaking the spell that had momentarily bound them together, though the ghost of his touch remained on her skin.
The attic window,
she suggested, turning her flashlight toward the small dormer window half hidden behind a stack of old trunks.
If we can break through, we might be able to reach the second-floor landing.
They worked together to move the heavy trunks, their bodies moving in unexpected harmony. Claire found herself acutely aware of Archer's proximity, the controlled strength in his movements, the clean scent of his skin beneath the faint trace of wood smoke, the way his hands occasionally brushed against hers as they cleared a path to the window. Each accidental touch sent tiny shocks through her system, making it hard to concentrate. When they finally reached it, disappointment settled heavily between them. The window was too small for either of them to fit through, its leaded glass offering a view of nothing but swirling snow and darkness beyond. The brutal beauty of the storm was hypnotic, endless white flakes rushing past the glass in a dizzying dance.
Another approach,
Archer said, refusing to accept defeat. His gaze swept the attic, assessing and calculating.
The walls in these old cabins, sometimes there are spaces between the interior and exterior construction, maintenance passages, access points for repairs.
Claire nodded, already moving toward the east wall where she knew the cabin's original structure had been expanded decades earlier.
Here,
she said, tapping a section of paneling that sounded hollow compared to its surroundings. Together they pressed against the panels, searching for any mechanism that might release a hidden door. Claire's fingers found a small irregularity in the wood grain. Not a knot, but a carefully disguised button flush with the surface. She pressed it firmly, and a section of the wall swung inward with a reluctant creak of disused hinges. A narrow passage stretched before them, barely wide enough for one person to navigate sideways. The darkness within seemed almost solid, promising unknown dangers.
I'll go first.
Already moving toward the opening, her heart hammering against her ribs with both fear and anticipation, Claire said. Archer caught her arm, his touch gentle but firm.
We don't know what's in there,
He warned,
or who might be waiting.
his eyes held genuine concern, a warmth that seemed at odds with his usually guarded demeanor. The question swirled in her mind, unanswerable, yet insistent.
Together, then.
She conceded, letting him stand beside her at the threshold of the dark passage. Their shoulders brushed, the simple contact oddly reassuring. The space was confining, forcing them to press against each other as they edged forward. Claire could feel Archer's chest against her back, his breath warm on her neck, his hand lightly touching her waist to maintain contact in the darkness. The intimacy of their position sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the attic's chill. His body was solid and warm behind hers, a shield against whatever might await them.
Stay close,
He murmured, his lips near her ear. The low rumble of his voice vibrated through her, stirring something warm and languid in the pit of her stomach. The passage turned sharply, then began to descend via a steep, narrow staircase. Claire's flashlight beam revealed cobwebs and dust, evidence that this route had been unused for years.
This must connect to the original servants' quarters.
Archer whispered, his lips close to her ear. The low rumble of his voice reverberated through Claire's body, stirring something warm and unexpected in her chest. At the bottom of the stairs, they found themselves facing another panel. Chapter 4, The Forbidden Journal.
Watch your step.
Claire whispered, her voice unnaturally loud in the confined space. Her flashlight beam revealed crumbling wooden stairs disappearing into darkness below. Ancient cobwebs clung to the rough-hewn walls, disintegrating at their passing like ghostly fingers reluctantly releasing their hold. Archer's warm presence behind her offered strange comfort as they navigated the treacherous descent. Each step creaked ominously beneath their weight, the wood protesting after years of neglect. The air grew increasingly cold and damp, carrying the earthy scent of soil and stone.
I think we're below the main level now.
Archer murmured, his breath warm against her neck.
There shouldn't even be a basement in a structure this old.
Claire felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the temperature. His proximity seemed to sharpen her awareness, the heat radiating from his body, the subtle scent of his cologne cutting the cesium, through the musty air.
Prohibition era, maybe,
she said, trying to focus on the task at hand rather than the way her skin tingled where his breath had touched it.
Hidden storage for contraband.
She swept her flashlight beam across the walls, noting the peculiar craftsmanship.
See how the mortar pattern changes here? This section was built later, possibly in the 1920s. Someone went to considerable trouble to hide this place.
Whoever built this wanted to keep secrets,
Archer observed. His voice had dropped to a lower register, intimate and close.
Question is, are those secrets still here?
The narrow stairway ended abruptly at a small landing. Before them stood a heavy oak door, its surface blackened with age, iron hinges orange with rust. Claire reached for the handle, then hesitated, an inexplicable dread washing over her.
Something wrong?
Archer asked, his hand finding hers in the darkness. Claire struggled to explain the sudden chill that had nothing to do with the temperature.
Just a feeling, like we're about to cross a threshold we can't uncross.
His fingers tightened around hers, neither of them acknowledging the intimacy of the gesture.
Whatever's on the other side, we face it together.
Claire looked up at him, his features half illuminated by the flashlight's glow. The shadows accentuated the strong line of his jaw, the intensity in his dark eyes. For a moment, the mystery awaiting them seemed less important than the warmth of his hand around hers.
Together, then,
she murmured, returning the pressure of his fingers. With her free hand, she grasped the iron handle and pulled. The door resisted at first, then gave way with a groan that seemed to rise from the depths of the earth itself. Cold, stale air rushed past them as a cavernous space opened before them. a cellar far larger than the cabin above would suggest.
My God,
Claire breathed, stepping forward. The beam of her flashlight barely penetrated the vastness of the space, revealing only fragments at a time, stone walls glistening with moisture, floor-to-ceiling shelves lined with dusty wine bottles, mason jars with unidentifiable contents preserved in murky liquid. Archer stepped beside her, their shoulders touching.
This is unexpected,
he said, his voice hushed with wonder. The simple contact sent warmth cascading through Claire despite the cellar's chill.
it looks like some kind of gathering space.
Claire observed, noting the heavy wooden table centered before a massive stone fireplace. Ornate chairs surrounded the table, their high backs carved with intricate patterns, candle stubs and tarnished holders dotted the surface, wax pooled and hardened in ghostly patterns.
Not just for storage.
Archer agreed, moving deeper into the room.
This was designed for meetings, secret ones.
Claire followed, her heart quickening.
The prohibition theory doesn't explain all this. This setup suggests something more organized, more ceremonial.
Her flashlight beam caught something on one of the walls, a tapestry, ancient and faded, its once vibrant colors muted by time. She moved closer, examining the woven scene. Figures in hooded robes gathered around a central fire, their faces obscured, hands raised toward a night sky dotted with stars.
Archer,
She called softly.
look at this.
He appeared at her side, his warmth a shield against the cellar's chill, his shoulder pressed against hers as they studied the tapestry together.
Ceremonial.
He said, his voice low.
Ritualistic, like you said.
His fingers brushed against hers as he reached to touch the fabric, sending a flutter through her stomach.
What were they doing out here? So isolated from everything.
Whatever it was,
Claire said.
they didn't want anyone to know.
Look at this.
Archer called softly, drawing her attention to a section of wall partially hidden behind a massive oak cabinet.
There's something carved here.
Claire joined him, their bodies aligning with natural ease as they examined the wall. Crude symbols had been etched into the stone, circles containing geometric patterns, lines radiating outward like sun rays, strange angular letters unlike any alphabet Claire recognized.
What do you make of this?
She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She was acutely aware of him beside her, the rise and fall of his chest as he breathed, the warmth emanating from his body, the clean scent of him cutting through the cellar's musty air. Archer traced one of the symbols with his fingertip, his expression troubled.
I'm not sure, but I've seen similar markings in historical texts about frontier cults.
A shudder worked its way up Claire's spine, raising gooseflesh along her arms.
Cults? In Montana?
The isolation, the harsh winters.
Archer's voice was thoughtful as he continued examining the markings. His face was so close to hers that she could see the faint stubble along his jaw, the tiny flecks of amber in his brown eyes.
Desperate circumstances can lead to desperate beliefs.
People seeking control in an uncontrollable environment,
Claire murmured, understanding dawning.
creating rituals to make sense of chaos.
Exactly.
His gaze met hers, and something passed between them, a current of understanding that transcended words. For a moment, Claire forgot about the symbols, about the cellar, about everything except the intensity in his eyes. She stepped back, suddenly flustered, eager to put distance between herself and both the carved symbols and Archer's unsettling proximity. As she did, her elbow knocked against the cabinet, causing it to shift slightly with a grinding of wood against stone. A metallic ping echoed through the cellar as something fell from behind the cabinet, landing on the floor between them. A small brass key glinted in the flashlight beam.
Looks old.
Archer remarked, retrieving it. The key was ornate, its handle formed into an intricate pattern that matched one of the wall symbols.
And important.
Claire's flashlight caught something else, a small keyhole in the wall, nearly invisible against the rough stone. It sat at the center of the largest carved circle, disguised as part of the pattern. Their eyes met in silent understanding. Heart pounding, Claire watched as Archer inserted the key into the lock. It turned with surprising ease, and a section of stone wall swung inward, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay a single object, a leather-bound journal, its cover cracked and faded, tied closed with a frayed ribbon. Archer lifted it carefully as one might handle a bomb. The weight of the moment pressed upon them both, time suspended as they stared at the journal. Its presence seemed to alter the very air around them, charged with possibility and dread.
Should we?
Claire's voice sounded strange to her own ears, distant and uncertain.
We have to,
Archer replied, his gaze meeting hers. The intensity in his dark eyes made her breath catch.
Whatever's written here, it's why we're all here, why someone locked us in the attic, why we found those photographs.
Claire nodded, drawn into the gravity of his certainty.
You're right. Whatever secrets this place holds, they're tied to why we're all trapped here.
He untied the ribbon with careful fingers, the leather creaking as he opened the cover. Yellowed pages filled with cramped handwriting greeted them. The ink faded to brown with age. At the top of the first page, a name was inscribed in bold letters.
Thomas Winters.
Claire gasped, her knees suddenly weak.
That's my father's journal.
The words seemed to stick in her throat, half strangled.
My father's handwriting.
Archer's hand found the small of her back, steadying her. The gesture was protective, intimate, his palm warm through the thin material of her blouse.
Are you sure?
I'd know it anywhere.
She whispered, fighting back a sudden rush of emotion.
All those birthday cards, notes in my lunchbox, that strong, slanted script.
Her finger hovered over the page, not quite touching, as if the ink might smudge beneath her fingertip.
What is my father's journal doing, hidden in a secret compartment in this cellar?
They moved to the heavy wooden table, by unspoken consensus, setting the journal down and pulling 2 chairs close together. Their thighs pressed against each other as they sat, neither moving away from the contact. Claire was grateful for the warmth of him, the solidity, as her world tilted on its axis.
Are you ready?
Archer asked, his voice gentle. His hand covered hers where it rested on the table, the gesture both comforting and questioning. The first entries were mundane, daily logs of sheriff business, weather reports, notes about local disputes, but as they turned the pages, the handwriting changed, becoming more erratic, the lines slanting across the page with increasing urgency. July 15th, 1992. Called to Whispering Pines regarding accident. Female victim, approximately 30 years, identified as Catherine Reed. Apparent fall from upper balcony. Suspicious circumstances, no witnesses. Dr. Garfield arrived 40 minutes after my team. Body already cold. Reed's family notified. Claire's hand found Archer's beneath the table, their fingers intertwining instinctively as they continued reading. The simple contact anchored her as her father's words pulled them deeper into the past. She glanced at Archer's profile, saw the tightening of his jaw, the slight flare of his nostrils as he inhaled sharply.
Catherine Reed,
she whispered.
Your aunt.
Archer nodded once, a sharp movement. His fingers tightened around hers with almost painful pressure, but Claire didn't pull away. She returned the grip, offering what comfort she could as they continued reading. July 17th, 1992. Received call from mayor. Case to be closed immediately. Accidental death. Reminded him protocol requires full investigation. He mentioned upcoming re-election, county funding, my pension. Message clear enough.
They pressured him,
Claire murmured, a strange mix of relief and horror washing over her.
From the beginning, they tried to shut the investigation down.
The question is why?
Archer responded, his voice tight.
What were they hiding?
The next entries painted a clearer picture, one that made Claire's blood run cold. July 20th, 1992. Fontaine kids changed statements, now claim they weren't at cabin that night. Father recently received zoning approval for new development. Coincidence? Whitmore at bank pushing paperwork through unusually fast. Something not right. Archer's grip tightened on Claire's hand, his jaw clenched, a muscle working beneath the skin. When he spoke, his voice was strained.
Your father knew it wasn't an accident.
The entries grew increasingly paranoid, her father's neat handwriting deteriorating into frantic scrawls. August 5th, 1992. Found symbols at Reed death site. Matched markings in cabin cellar. Not publicized. Devereaux woman seen leaving cabin night before accident. Claims theatrical research Her rivalry with Reed well known. Claire felt a chill race down her spine.
Symbols at the death site, like the ones on the wall here.
He connected Catherine's death to this place.
Archer said, voice hushed.
To whatever happened down here?
As they read further, the journal painted a picture of conspiracy, of powerful figures united in silence, of threats and intimidation. August 10th, 1992. Evidence missing from lockup. Blood samples, Reed's personal effects, photographs of scene, inside job. Deputy Carlson acting strangely, pressure from all sides to sign off on accident report. August 15th, 1992. They were all there that night, all of them. The ritual wasn't supposed to end in death, but someone took it further. Someone wanted Reed dead, and they're all covering for each other or for someone else. I don't know who to trust anymore.
A ritual?
Claire breathed, looking up at Archer. Their faces were inches apart, both leaning over the journal.
Not just a gathering, a ritual of some kind, and it went wrong.
Or someone used it as cover.
Archer suggested, his voice barely audible. His eyes reflected the flashlight's beam, dark and intense.
To commit murder.
The final entries chilled Claire to the bone. Her father's paranoia leapt from the page, his words becoming disjointed, rambling about conspiracies and threats. September 3rd, 1992. They're watching me, following me. Had to hide evidence throughout cabin. Found Reed's necklace, blood-stained. Symbols carved into pendant match cellar wall. More than random killing. Ritual. Sacrifice. Gods they believe will protect them. Madness. The last entry was dated a week before Thomas Winters resigned as sheriff. September 10th, 1992. I've signed the papers. Official cause, accidental death. God forgive me. They threatened Sarah and the baby, my Claire. Had no choice. But I've hidden the truth where they'll never find it. Someday someone will know what really happened at Whispering Pines. The journal ended abruptly. Claire stared at her father's final words, tears burning behind her eyes. The man she had idolized, whose moral compass had guided her own career. He had compromised everything to protect her.
Claire.
Archer's voice broke the heavy silence, gentle, yet urgent. She looked up to find his eyes searching her face, full of a tenderness that made her heart ache.
Your father was coerced. He was trying to protect you.
His thumb brushed across her cheek, and Claire realized tears had fallen without her awareness. The intimate gesture momentarily distracted her from the horror of what they'd discovered.
He covered up my aunt's murder,
Archer said, each word precise and cutting, though his touch remained gentle on her face.
He knew it wasn't an accident.
Claire pulled away slightly, needing space to process.
He was threatened.
She whispered, the words hollow even to her own ears.
They threatened his family. Me.
Archer stood abruptly, breaking their physical connection. The loss of his warmth left Claire suddenly cold. He paced the length of the table, tension radiating from his body.
All these years, I believed she fell.
He said, voice tight with restrained emotion.
A tragic accident. That's what everyone said, what the official report stated. Signed by Sheriff Thomas Winters.
Claire rose too, desperate to bridge the growing distance between them.
Archer, please. He was trying to find the truth. You read what he wrote. He hid evidence throughout the cabin.
Evidence he never came back for.
Archer countered, turning to face her. In the harsh beam of the flashlight, his features seemed carved from stone.
Evidence that might have given my family closure.
He couldn't come back,
Claire argued, her own grief and confusion giving way to defensive anger.
They were watching him, threatening him.
And what about after? When you were grown? When he was no longer sheriff?
Archer's questions hit like physical blows.
He chose silence, Claire.
The air between them crackled with tension. The fragile connection they had built now strained to breaking. Claire wanted to reach for him, to somehow recapture the closeness they had shared moments ago, but her arms remained leaden at her sides.
I don't know why he never came forward,
she admitted, her voice small.
But I know my father. He was a good man.
Archer's expression softened slightly, the anger in his eyes giving way to something more complex. Hurt, confusion, and beneath it all, a reluctant understanding.
Good men sometimes make impossible choices.
he said, the harshness leaving his voice.
Your father chose you.
Claire felt something crack inside her chest, relief, gratitude for his unexpected understanding.
He still tried to preserve the truth,
She said,
He hid evidence throughout the cabin.
Evidence someone wants us to find.
Archer said thoughtfully, moving closer to her again.
Think about it, Claire. Someone gathered everyone connected to Catherine's death in this cabin during the worst blizzard in 50 years.
Understanding dawned in Claire's mind.
Someone who knows what really happened.
Yes.
Archer agreed, now close enough that she could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the slight shadow of stubble along his jaw.
Someone who...
A sound from the darkness beyond. Chapter 5. Sins of the Fathers. Claire's hand found Archer's arm in the darkness, her fingers digging into his sleeve. They stood motionless, barely breathing, as the footsteps grew closer. The journal lay forgotten on the table between them, its secrets momentarily eclipsed by the more immediate threat.
Who's there?
Archer called, his voice steady despite the tension radiating through his body. The beam of another flashlight cut through the darkness, temporarily blinding them. Claire instinctively stepped in front of Archer, her former deputy training kicking in before she could think better of it.
Claire, is that you?
Preston Whitmore's aristocratic voice preceded him as he emerged from the shadows, looking oddly at home among the ancient stones. His silver hair caught the light, creating a halo effect that belied the troubled expression on his lined face.
I heard voices. I've been looking for you both.
How did you find this place?
Claire demanded, not lowering her guard. After what they'd just read, everyone was a suspect. Preston's gaze drifted to the open journal on the table, and something like recognition flashed across his features.
I see you found it,
He said quietly.
Thomas Winter's account.
The cold air in the cellar seemed to thicken between them. Claire felt goosebumps rise along her arms that had nothing to do with the temperature. She shifted closer to Archer, finding unexpected comfort in his proximity. Archer moved beside Claire, their shoulders touching. The simple contact steadied her.
You knew about this?
He asked, voice taut with controlled anger. Preston nodded, his shoulders sagging as if a great weight pressed upon them.
Not initially, no. But I've been searching for answers about Catherine Reed's death for decades.
His eyes met Archer's.
She was your aunt, wasn't she? I recognized you from photographs when you arrived, but I wasn't certain until now.
Claire studied Archer's face, watching as a complex series of emotions flickered across his features, surprise, pain, and something that looked like vindication. The realization that he had personal stakes in this mystery shifted something in her perception of him. In that moment, he wasn't just the handsome stranger who'd arrived at the cabin. He was someone with wounds as deep as her own.
And why would Catherine Reed's death concern you, Mr. Whitmore?
Claire asked, stepping closer to Archer, drawn to his warmth in the cellar's chill. The stones around them seemed to absorb their words, ancient and patient witnesses to yet another layer of secrets being peeled away. Preston's smile held no humor.
Because my father orchestrated her murder.
The confession hung in the air between them, heavy and poison-filled. Claire felt Archer tense beside her, his breath catching. Without thinking, she reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining as if they'd been doing it for years instead of hours.
Mm-hmm.
His skin was warm against hers, a sharp contrast to the cold stones surrounding them.
I suspected as much.
Archer said finally, his voice hoarse.
But hearing you say it...
I've spent half my life trying to make amends for my father's sins,
Preston said, running a hand through his silver hair.
Though I know that's impossible. Perhaps we should continue this upstairs,
Preston suggested, eyeing the darkness around them.
This place has held enough secrets.
Claire nodded, gathering her father's journal while Archer collected their flashlights. As they followed Preston back toward the narrow stairway, she noticed how Archer positioned himself between her and the older man, protective, without being obvious about it. The gesture touched something deep within her, a place long walled off where trust and affection had once lived before she'd banished them after the shooting.
Why now?
Claire asked as they reached the foot of the stairs.
Why bring everyone together after all these years?
Preston paused, one foot on the bottom step. In the dim light, his face looked carved from stone, all harsh planes and deep shadows.
Because someone has started killing us off, one by one. 3 members of the original group have died in the past year. Accidents, the police called them.
His laugh was brittle.
I know better.
And you brought the survivors here? To a remote cabin in a blizzard?
Archer's tone made it clear what he thought of that plan. His hand tightened around Claire's, a silent promise that whatever came next, they would face it together.
I brought them here to flush out a killer.
Preston replied, his voice dropping to nearly a whisper.
Before they finish what they started.
The main floor of the cabin felt impossibly bright and warm after the cellar's dank chill. Claire blinked against the light, noticing that the remaining guests had gathered in the great room, their faces turned toward the returning trio with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright suspicion.
Where have you 3 been?
Margot Devereaux demanded, her silver hair swept into an elegant updo despite their isolation.
Dr. Garfield was just telling us about some equipment missing from his medical bag.
More theft?
Claire asked, her mind racing.
What was taken?
The physician's normally steady hands fidgeted with his cardigan buttons.
Sedatives, mainly. And a scalpel.
His eyes darted nervously around the room.
I keep a careful inventory. They were definitely there yesterday.
Claire felt Archer's hand at the small of her back, a steadying presence. The contact was brief, but intentional, communicating his support without words. She found herself leaning into the touch before he withdrew, the ghost of his warmth lingering on her skin.
I believe I can shed some light on recent events,
Preston said, moving to stand before the massive stone fireplace. The flames cast dramatic shadows across his aristocratic features.
But first, we need complete honesty from everyone in this room.
James Fontaine scoffed from his position by the window.
Honesty. Rich. Coming from a Whitmore.
The hostility in his voice sparked immediate tension.
You're one to talk about honesty,
His sister Eliza snapped, surprising everyone with her vehemence. Always the quieter of the pair, her sudden animation drew all eyes.
You were the one who changed your story first.
The fireplace crackled, sending up a shower of sparks as if punctuating her accusation. Claire exchanged a look with Archer, confirmation passing between them. The journal had mentioned the Fontaine siblings changing their witness statements.
What exactly are you implying, Miss Fontaine?
Margot asked, her theatrical training evident in the perfect arch of her eyebrow.
I'm not implying anything,
Eliza retorted.
I'm stating facts. We were all there that night at Whispering Pines, 30 years ago, when Catherine Reed died.
A collective intake of breath filled the room. Claire felt the air change, becoming charged with the electric tension of long-buried truths struggling to surface. Outside, the wind howled, a mournful counterpoint to the confessions beginning to unfold.
I found Thomas Winter's journal,
Claire said, holding up the leather-bound volume.
He knew Catherine Reed's death wasn't an accident.
Of course it wasn't.
Dr. Garfield muttered, suddenly looking every one of his 70-plus years.
We all knew. We just couldn't admit it.
Couldn't or wouldn't.
Archer's voice cut through the room, sharp as the missing scalpel. His proximity to Claire felt both protective and seeking protection, their shoulders nearly touching as they stood united before the others.
You don't understand what it was like back then,
James said, running a hand through his thinning hair.
what we were involved in.
Then explain it.
Claire challenged, unconsciously moving closer to Archer. Their arms brushed, the contact sending warmth through her despite the gravity of the moment. Preston cleared his throat.
Perhaps I should begin. My father, Harold Whitmore, discovered a rare mineral deposit on land adjacent to Reed property, worth millions even back then.
His eyes fixed on Archer.
Your aunt refused to sell. She was principled.
She loved that land.
Archer said softly, the pain in his voice stirring something protective in Claire.
It had been in her family for generations.
My father wasn't accustomed to hearing the word no,
Preston continued.
especially not from a woman.
He grimaced.
He approached several influential locals with a proposition. Financial gain for everyone involved if they helped persuade Catherine.
Persuasion that turned deadly,
Margot interjected, her elegant hands twisting in her lap.
though that was never the intention, at least not for most of us.
The wood in the fireplace settled with a soft collapse, sending up another flurry of sparks. Claire watched the faces around her, reading the guilt and fear that time had not managed to erase. She thought of her father carrying the weight of this knowledge alone, unable to bring justice to light.
What exactly were you all involved in?
Claire asked, her voice cutting through the crackling of the fire. Dr. Garfield stood, moving to pour himself a generous whiskey from the bar cart.
It began innocently enough.
He said, not meeting anyone's eyes.
A research group, studying alternative healing methods, ancient practices.
You mean rituals,
Archer said flatly.
like the symbols carved in the cellar walls.
The doctor flinched as if struck.
Those came later, when things escalated.
The Origin Society.
Eliza offered, her voice barely above a whisper.
That's what we called ourselves. We were seeking wisdom from older traditions, power from forgotten sources.
Power.
James echoed with a bitter laugh.
We were naive children playing with forces we didn't understand.
Margot's theatrical voice carried across the room.
I joined because Catherine and I were competing for the same role in New York. I thought the rituals might give me an edge.
Shame colored her words.
But I never wanted her dead.
Wanted or not, she died.
Archer said, his voice tight with controlled emotion.
And someone made it look like an accident.
The wind howled outside, rattling the windows as if trying to join their confession session. Claire found herself gravitating closer to Archer, their thighs nearly touching as they sat side by side on the leather sofa. His presence anchored her as the horrifying truth unfolded.
My father seized upon your little cult,
Preston said, addressing the room.
He saw an opportunity. He infiltrated your group, learning your rituals, your beliefs, and he twisted them.
The night Catherine died,
Dr. Garfield said, staring into his whiskey.
we were performing a ritual meant to bind her will to ours. Harmless suggestion, or so we thought.
His hands trembled.
Harold added something to the ceremonial drink. I didn't realize until Catherine began convulsing.
Claire felt Archer stiffen beside her. Without thinking, she placed her hand on his knee, a gesture of comfort that felt as natural as breathing. His hand covered hers immediately, his fingers warm and strong.
You poisoned her.
Archer said, his voice dangerously quiet.
Not me,
The doctor protested, clutching his glass like a shield.
Harold. But I didn't do enough to save her.
He looked down.
By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. We panicked. Harold suggested staging an accident.
And you all went along with it,
Claire said, disgust evident in her tone.
including the staged fall from the balcony.
James nodded, looking physically ill.
We were terrified. Harold reminded us that we were all complicit in the ritual. No one would believe we hadn't planned her death.
And then my father arrived to investigate.
Claire concluded, the pieces fitting together with sickening clarity.
And Harold Whitmore threatened his family to ensure his silence.
Not just threatened.
Preston said quietly.
He demonstrated his reach. Your father's brake lines were cut. A warning. There was a break-in at your childhood home while your mother was there alone with you.
He met Claire's shocked gaze.
Harold made it clear that Sheriff Winter's family would suffer increasingly severe accidents unless he cooperated.
Claire felt the blood drain from her face. She remembered that break-in, her mother's fear, the new security system installed afterward, the way her father began locking his gun in the safe rather than simply unloading it. Archer's arm slipped around her shoulders, drawing her against his side. The gesture was so natural, so needed, that she didn't resist, leaning into his strength.
So my father falsified his report.
She said, her voice unsteady.
To protect us,
But he never stopped investigating.
Preston added.
He collected evidence for years, hiding it throughout this cabin. I've been searching for it since my father's deathbed confession 3 years ago.
You orchestrated this gathering.
Archer realized, his body warm against Claire's side.
You brought us all here.
Preston nodded.
I needed everyone who was there that night. I needed the truth to come out.
He looked at Claire.
I never anticipated you would be here. That was genuine coincidence.
Or fate.
Margot murmured, her actress's flair for the dramatic undiminished by age.
3 of our group have already died.
Preston continued.
Edward Carmichael had a car accident when his brakes failed on a mountain road. Sylvia Morton drowned in a bathtub, despite being an excellent swimmer. And Robert Jenkins fell down his stairs. A man who'd spent 40 years as a stuntman, suddenly clumsy in his own home.
You think someone is picking off the members of your group.
Claire said.
But who? And why now, after all these years?
That's what I've been trying to determine.
Preston replied.
I thought bringing everyone together might reveal the culprit.
Or provide a convenient collection of targets.
Archer pointed out, his arm still protectively around Claire's shoulders. A sudden crash from the kitchen shattered the moment. Claire and Archer were on their feet instantly, moving as one toward the sound. The others followed more cautiously. They found Dr. Garfield sprawled on the floor, blood pooling beneath his head, the remnants of a broken water glass scattered around him. His face was chalk white against the dark wood floor, eyelids fluttering. "Check his pulse," Claire commanded, instinctively taking charge. Archer knelt beside the elderly physician, fingers seeking the carotid artery.
It's there, but weak,
he reported.
Help me turn him.
Together, they gently rolled the doctor onto his back. A nasty gash marked his temple, still bleeding freely, the metallic scent of blood mixed with the lingering aromas of dinner, creating a nauseating combination.
He must have slipped,
James suggested, hovering uselessly nearby. But Claire's attention had caught on something else, a small empty syringe partially hidden beneath the edge of the counter. She pointed it out to Archer, their eyes meeting in silent understanding.
This wasn't an accident,
she said, rising to her feet.
Someone injected him with something, probably his own missing sedatives. But who?
The Eliza asked, her face pale with shock.
We were all in the great room together.
Not all of us.
Margot said slowly.
Not the entire time.
The group exchanged suspicious glances, the temporary unity of their confession session evaporating like morning mist. Outside, the wind shrieked with renewed vigor, driving snow against the windows in violent gusts. The cabin seemed to contract around them, the walls creaking ominously.
We need to move him to the couch,
Claire said, taking control of the situation,
and secure whatever medications remain in his bag.
As they carefully transported the unconscious doctor, Claire felt the weight of hidden truths pressing down upon them. The journal had revealed only part of the story. Someone among them still harbored deadly secrets, secrets worth killing to protect. Later, after they had made Dr. Garfield as comfortable as possible, Claire found herself alone with Archer in the small library adjacent to the great room. Bookshelves lined with leather-bound volumes surrounded them, the scent of old paper and cedar creating an oddly intimate atmosphere despite the circumstances.
Do you think he'll survive?
Archer asked, his voice low to avoid being overheard by the others. Claire nodded, though uncertainty flickered across her features.
The bleeding has stopped, and his breathing is steady. Without proper medical care, though.
She left the sentence unfinished. Archer moved closer, drawn to her with an intensity that should have frightened her. Instead, it felt like the most natural thing in the world when he reached for her hand.
I keep thinking about your father,
he said softly.
What he must have endured, knowing the truth but unable to act on it.
Protecting his family,
Claire murmured.
I used to worship him. Then when he retired early, started drinking, I thought he'd lost his courage.
Tears welled in her eyes.
I judged him so harshly.
You couldn't have known,
Archer said, his hand finding hers in the dim light, their fingers intertwined with an ease that belied their short acquaintance.
He carried that burden alone,
Claire said, looking down at their joined hands.
For years.
Not completely alone,
Archer corrected gently.
He left breadcrumbs, evidence hidden throughout the cabin. He believed someday someone would find the truth.
Claire looked up, finding his face much closer than expected. In the firelight, his eyes held warmth that seemed to reach inside her, touching places long closed off.
I'm sorry about your aunt,
she said.
She deserved justice.
As did your father.
Archer replied. His free hand rose to her face, brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. The touch was feather-light, yet electric, sending shivers across her skin. Chapter 6. Darkness Descends. Claire's fingers moved instinctively to her pocket, retrieving the small tactical flashlight she carried out of habit. Its beam cut through the darkness, illuminating surprised faces frozen in various stages of alarm.
Everyone stay calm,
she said, her voice carrying the practiced authority of her deputy days.
The generators failed completely. We need to conserve whatever battery-powered light we have.
Bloody marvelous.
Margot muttered, her theatrical training giving her voice projection despite the whisper.
First a murderer. Now we're in the dark with them.
The darkness pressed against them like a physical presence, the shadows between their meager lights seeming to breathe and shift. Claire swept her beam across the room, taking stock of their situation. Dr. Garfield stirred weakly on the couch, his complexion ashen beneath the makeshift bandage that circled his head like a grotesque crown. In the harsh light, the dried blood appeared black rather than red, a stark reminder of their precarious situation.
We need to gather all available light sources.
Archer said, already moving toward the kitchen.
Candles, flashlights, anything.
Claire followed, her beam joining his. Their shadows danced together on the wall, merging and separating like lovers reaching for each other. In the kitchen's darkness, Archer seemed different. More raw somehow, the sharp planes of his face sculpted by the narrow beam of light, his eyes deeper, more intense.
I noticed a drawer of emergency supplies earlier,
he said, pulling it open.
Candles, matches, a couple of battery lanterns.
The drawer revealed its treasures, thick white candles, boxes of long matches, and 2 battery-powered lanterns that looked sturdy but well-used. Claire watched as Archer's hands moved with calm efficiency, sorting through the supplies. His fingers were long, graceful despite their strength. She found herself wondering how those hands would feel against her skin.
You're good at this,
she said quietly, her voice catching slightly. He glanced up, catching her gaze. The moment stretched between them, taut with something neither dared name. His eyes held hers, dark and mysterious in the shadow, yet somehow warm, inviting her closer.
Former army,
he replied finally.
Old habits.
You never mentioned that.
Claire moved slightly closer, drawn to his warmth in the rapidly cooling room. His smile was brief but genuine, transforming his face completely.
Lots of things we haven't had time to mention.
Claire felt her heartbeat quicken, responding to something in his tone, the gentle suggestion that perhaps in different circumstances there might be time for more. Time for whispered confidences, for learning the stories written in the scar she glimpsed on his forearms, for understanding what made him the man standing before her now. The simple truth of it struck her with surprising force. How strange that she could feel so drawn to someone whose life remained largely unknown to her. Yet here they were, moving together in the darkness and anticipating each other's needs as if they'd shared a lifetime.
Strange, isn't it?
She said, her voice barely above a whisper as she reached for a box of matches.
How crisis reveals things about people.
His eyebrow lifted slightly.
Is that what this is? A revelation?
The question hung between them, layered with meaning beyond the practical assessment of their working relationship. Claire felt heat rise to her cheeks despite the dropping temperature. In the flickering light, she could see his pulse beating at his throat.
At the very least,
she replied carefully.
It's fortunate we found each other.
Very fortunate.
He agreed, his voice lower now, intimate in the small space between them. His hand brushed against hers as they reached for the same candle, and neither pulled away immediately. The contact, brief and innocent, sent electricity coursing through her veins. They distributed candles and lanterns throughout the main living areas, creating islands of golden light in the sea of darkness. The flames cast a honeyed glow across the worn furniture, softening the harsh reality of their situation, but with each passing minute, the temperature inside the cabin noticeably dropped, the bitter cold seeping through the walls despite their efforts.
We need to maintain the fire,
Preston said, placing another log on the ember.
It's our only heat source now.
The fire hissed and crackled, sparks flying upward as the new log settled. Firelight painted Preston's aristocratic features in amber and gold, softening the calculating intelligence. In his eyes, Claire had always found him difficult to read, his Oxford education and family wealth creating a barrier that even her years of law enforcement training couldn't quite penetrate.
How much wood do we have left?
James asked, anxiety evident in his clipped tone. He stood near his sister Eliza, unconsciously positioning himself between her and the others, a protector's stance that Claire recognized from her years dealing with families in crisis.
Enough for 3 days, maybe 4 if we're careful,
Claire answered, mentally cataloging their supplies.
There's more stacked against the east wall outside, but with the snow...
We'd need to dig through 10 feet of it.
Archer finished.
Possible, but difficult.
Claire's gaze met his across the room, a current of understanding flowing between them. They were already thinking alike, planning ahead. She felt a strange comfort in that synchronicity, as if they'd been partners for years rather than strangers thrown together by circumstance. Eliza huddled near the fire, wrapping a blanket tighter around her shoulders. In the firelight, she looked younger than her 35 years, vulnerable in a way that stirred Claire's protective instincts.
What if the killer strikes again in the dark?
Eliza asked, her voice trembling slightly.
We're completely vulnerable now. We stay together,
Claire said firmly.
No one goes anywhere alone.
That didn't help, Garfield,
James pointed out, gesturing toward the semi-conscious doctor, whose breathing had grown shallow and labored. Claire moved to check on the doctor, feeling for his pulse. It fluttered beneath her fingertips, rapid and weak. His skin felt clammy despite the heat from the nearby fire. Without proper medical attention, his condition would only worsen.
Which means someone managed to slip away unnoticed,
Margot said, suspicion coloring her words as her eyes swept across the gathered faces. The famous actress sat slightly apart from the others, her elegant posture at odds with the rustic setting. Even in crisis, she maintained the poise that had made her famous on stage and screen. The tension in the room thickened, each person suddenly aware of the shadows behind them. The unknown intentions of the figures seated nearby. Claire watched as subtle shifts occurred, bodies angling away from one another, eyes narrowing in assessment. The warmth they'd begun to build over the past day was crumbling under the weight of suspicion.
This is exactly what they want.
Archer said, his voice cutting through the growing distrust.
Division, paranoia. We need to stay focused.
On what exactly?
Preston asked, his cultured voice tinged with irritation.
We're trapped with a killer, in freezing darkness with dwindling supplies.
On survival,
Claire answered, rising from Garfield's side.
And on finding the truth. One supports the other.
She met each person's gaze in turn, challenging them to maintain their unity.
We're more vulnerable divided than we are together, even if one of us is responsible.
Archer nodded, moving to stand beside her. The simple gesture, choosing her side, sent warmth through her that had nothing to do with the fire's heat. His shoulder brushed against hers, the brief contact sending a flutter of awareness through her body that caught her off guard. She noticed the faint scent of pine and wood smoke clinging to his wool sweater, oddly comforting in their dire situation.
I need to check the generator,
he said.
There might be a way to repair it.
I'll go with you,
Claire said immediately, ignoring the pointed looks from the others. They gathered supplies, tools from a cabinet near the mudroom, spare parts Preston thought might be useful, and headed toward the cellar door, flashlights carving twin paths through the darkness. As Claire knelt to collect a wrench that had rolled beneath a cabinet, she felt Archer's eyes on her, watching with an intensity that made her pulse quicken.
Stay where we can hear you,
Claire instructed the remaining group.
Shout if anything happens.
The cellar stairs creaked beneath their weight, each step drawing them deeper into the cold, underground space where they'd found the journal. Their breath clouded before them, flashlight beams catching the vapor like spirits manifesting in the chill.
It's colder down here than it should be,
Claire observed, pulling her coat tighter.
Even with the heating system down?
Much colder.
Archer agreed, his voice low and close to her ear.
Almost as if
something's drawing the heat away,
Claire finished, feeling the back of her neck prickle in warning. The generator hulked in the corner, a dead metal beast. Archer knelt beside it, his hands moving with confident familiarity across its components. Claire held her flashlight steady, illuminating his work. The beam cast his profile in sharp relief, the strong line of his jaw, the slight furrow of concentration between his brows, the careful precision of his hands as they examined the machinery.
Power supply's completely fried.
He muttered after several minutes of examination.
Might be able to bypass it, but I'd need parts we don't have.
The Claire nodded, her flashlight sweeping the stone walls surrounding them. The beam caught something that made her pause, a strange indentation in the mortar between the stones.
Archer,
She said softly, moving closer to the wall.
look at this.
He joined her, their shoulders touching as they both examined the marking. It wasn't random damage. The symbol had been deliberately carved into the mortar, a complex geometric pattern that made Claire's skin prickle with unease.
There's another one.
Archer said, his beam finding a similar marking 3 feet away.
And another.
They followed the symbols, discovering a line of them encircling the entire cellar at precisely the same height. Some were simple, concentric circles or triangles within triangles, while others displayed complex interlocking patterns that seemed to shift and move when viewed too long.
These must be from the rituals Dr. Garfield mentioned.
Claire said, her finger hovering just above one particularly intricate design without touching it.
The Origin Society.
The symbols seemed to pulse in the beam of her flashlight, as if alive with some inner energy. Claire felt drawn to them, mesmerized by their intricate patterns. She reached out without thinking, her fingertips millimeters from touching the carved stone. Archer caught her wrist gently.
I wouldn't.
He said, his voice taut with concern. His fingers were warm against her skin, the contact sending a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cellar's unnatural cold. His thumb brushed against her pulse point, perhaps unconsciously, but the intimate gesture made her breath catch.
They form a circle.
Archer observed, stepping back to assess the pattern while still holding her wrist.
A boundary of some kind.
Their lights traced the circumference, revealing dozens of symbols, each unique, yet clearly related. The pattern stopped abruptly at the north wall, leaving a gap of unmarked stone about 2 feet wide.
Why break the circle?
Claire wondered aloud, acutely aware of Archer's continued hold on her. His fingers had relaxed, but not released, as if he'd forgotten he still held her, or as if he didn't want to let go. Archer ran his free hand along the blank section, his expression thoughtful.
In ritual magic, a circle represents protection, containing energy within or keeping something out. Breaking a circle
Creates a doorway.
Claire finished, the realization sending a chill through her that had nothing to do with the cellar's temperature. Their eyes met in the intersecting beams of their flashlights, understanding passing between them. Something had happened here beyond Catherine Reed's death. Something the Origin Society had been either summoning or containing. Archer's fingers slipped from her wrist, trailing down to briefly intertwine with hers before releasing completely. The gesture was so quick Claire might have imagined it, except for the lingering warmth on her skin.
I think...
He began. A sudden crash from upstairs shattered the moment, followed by Eliza's terrified scream. Claire and Archer bolted for the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, the intimate connection broken by the urgent need to respond. They emerged into chaos. The living room furniture had been overturned, candles scattered across the floor. James was helping Eliza to her feet, while Preston frantically tried to relight several extinguished candles. The temperature had dropped even further, their breath visible in cloudy puffs even in the main room.
What happened?
Claire demanded, scanning for injuries. Instinctively, she positioned herself at Archer's side, their bodies aligned in defensive readiness.
Something moved through here.
Margot said, her actress's composure finally cracking. Her hands trembled as she clutched at the neckline of her cashmere sweater.
Something we couldn't see. It knocked over the furniture, extinguished the candles.
That's impossible.
Archer began, but his voice lacked conviction. After what they discovered in the cellar, the word impossible seemed less certain.
I saw it too,
James interrupted, his face ashen. He stood protectively beside Eliza, his arm around her shoulders.
Like a shadow, but solid somehow. It passed right through the room.
Claire exchanged a glance with Archer, remembering the broken ritual circle beneath their feet. Before either could speak, a low moan came from the couch Dr. Garfield was sitting up. his eyes unnaturally wide, gleaming with feverish intensity.
They're coming through.
He whispered, voice cracking with terror.
We opened the way.
The doctor's words hung in the frigid air, crystallizing their fears into something tangible. Outside, the blizzard howled against the cabin walls, but the sound seemed transformed now. Less like wind, and more like distant, hungry voices calling to one another across an impossible distance.
What's coming through, Doctor?
Claire asked, approaching him cautiously. She felt Archer move with her, staying close, a warmth at her back that grounded her against the growing fear. Dr. Garfield's eyes fixed on something beyond her shoulder, seeing what no one else could.
What we invited. What Harold helped us summon.
His gaze shifted to her face, sudden recognition dawning in his fevered eyes.
You have his eyes. Thomas Winter's eyes. He tried to warn us.
Claire felt the blood drain from her face. Thomas Winters, her grandfather, a name rarely mentioned in her family, a shadowy figure who had died long before she was born. How could Garfield possibly know? Archer moved to Claire's side, his presence solid and reassuring. His arm brushed hers, a silent message of support.
Warned you about what?
The binding ritual wasn't just for Catherine.
The doctor continued, words tumbling out as if a dam had broken.
Harold said we needed to bind something else. Something ancient that lived in these mountains. He said it would give us power.
He laughed, a horrible broken sound.
But he lied. He just needed witnesses for Catherine's death. The ritual, the symbols, they were real, but he perverted their purpose.
Claire felt Archer's hand find hers in the dim light, his fingers intertwining with hers. The simple human contact anchored her against the rising tide of impossibilities. His palm was warm against hers, calloused and strong. She tightened her grip, drawing strength from the connection.
Doctor, you're not making sense.
Preston said, moving closer.
The symbols downstairs.
Claire interjected, reluctantly releasing Archer's hand to gesture toward the floor.
They form a circle with a break in it.
Garfield's face contorted with fresh horror.
The circle must remain unbroken. We sealed it after what happened. Someone's damaged it.
It wasn't damaged.
Archer said.
It was deliberately left incomplete.
A sudden gust of wind slammed against the cabin with such force that the entire structure groaned in protest. The temperature dropped noticeably, their breath now clearly visible even in the great room. Claire found herself moving closer to Archer, drawn to his warmth, his solidity in the face of mounting strangeness.
We need to close the circle.
Garfield insisted, attempting to rise before falling back weakly.
Before midnight, before the anniversary.
Anniversary of what?
Claire asked, though she already suspected the answer.
Catherine's death,
Preston supplied.
30 years ago tonight.
In the silence that followed, Claire became acutely aware of Archer beside her. His breathing, the subtle shift of his weight as he processed this information, the almost imperceptible movement as his hand sought hers again in the shadows between them. Their fingers touched, a whisper of contact that spoke volumes in the midst of their growing fear.
This is absurd,
James scoffed, though his voice lacked conviction.
Ghost stories to distract us from the real threat. A flesh and blood killer.
As if in answer, the fire flared suddenly, casting grotesque, elongated shadows across the walls, shadows that moved independently of their owners, twisting into shapes that resembled nothing human. For a brief, terrible moment, Claire could have sworn she saw faces in those shadows, watching them with hungry anticipation. The past had awakened in this isolated cabin, and as Archer's fingers tightened around hers, Claire knew with absolute certainty that before the night was through, they would all face what had been set in motion 30 years ago, a reckoning that had been waiting patiently in the shadows, growing stronger with each passing year. Chapter 7. Forbidden Rituals.
We need to find Dr. Garfield,
Claire said, breaking the stunned silence that had fallen over the group. The doctor had disappeared from the couch where he'd been resting, leaving behind only a rumpled blanket and the faint outline of his body in the cushions. James shook his head, keeping his arm protectively around Eliza.
He could barely sit up, let alone walk. He couldn't have gone far.
Unless something took him?
Margot whispered, voicing the fear they all felt but hadn't dared speak aloud. Claire turned to Archer, finding his eyes already on hers. Something passed between them, understanding, determination, a shared resolve that cut through the mounting terror surrounding them.
"We'll search in pairs,"
Claire said, her training taking over.
"No one goes alone. Not now."
They divided the cabin between them. Preston and Margot would check the main floor, James and Eliza would search the upper level, while Claire and Archer would investigate the remaining rooms off the kitchen and check the mudroom. The unspoken reality hung between them. Whatever had happened to Dr. Garfield, they might not want to face it alone. As the others dispersed, flashlight beams cutting through the darkness, Claire found herself alone with Archer in the kitchen. The candles they'd placed earlier cast a warm glow across the room, softening the hard edges of fear that had settled into both their expressions.
You okay?
Archer asked softly, his voice a warm contrast to the cold air between them. Claire considered lying, putting on the brave face she'd perfected over years of crisis management. Instead, she found herself answering honestly,
"No, but I'm managing."
His half-smile was brief but genuine.
That's more than most people would be doing in this situation.
The kitchen felt suddenly smaller, more intimate than it had moments before. Claire noticed the way the candlelight traced the contours of Archer's face, highlighting the strong line of his jaw, the intensity in his eyes that seemed fixed solely on her despite the chaos surrounding them.
"What about you?"
she asked, noticing the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes constantly swept their surroundings.
"You're handling this remarkably well for someone who came here expecting a quiet weekend of research."
He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture disarmingly vulnerable.
I've seen things in my career that...
He paused, seeming to search for words.
Let's just say I'm familiar with fear, with how it works, how it can freeze you or push you forward.
"And which is it doing to you right now?"
Claire asked, drawn closer to him by some invisible pull she couldn't explain.
Pushing.
He said simply, his voice dropping lower.
Toward answers, toward...
His eyes held hers, and the air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken possibilities.
I came here looking for answers about Catherine.
He finally said, checking the beam of his flashlight against his palm.
Never expected to find whatever this is.
Claire moved closer, drawn by the warmth radiating from him in the increasingly frigid air.
"We'll figure it out. Together."
His eyes met hers, and for a moment, the cabin, the storm, the danger, all of it receded. There was only Archer, his gaze steady on hers, a silent promise in the depth of those eyes that made her heart stutter in her chest.
Together,
he agreed, his voice lower, intimate. A crash from the mudroom shattered the moment. They moved as one, rushing toward the sound, flashlights extended. Claire reached the door first, pushing it open to reveal darkness and cold more intense than anywhere else in the cabin.
"Dr. Garfield?"
Claire called, her breath creating ghostly white clouds in the freezing air. The beam of her flashlight caught something dark and wet on the floor, a smear leading toward the small storage closet at the far end of the mudroom blood. Fresh and glistening in the artificial light. Archer placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. The warmth of his palm seeped through her sweater, a stark contrast to the bone-deep chill that had settled into her limbs. She glanced back at him, finding strength in the calm determination of his expression.
I don't like this.
He murmured, so close that his breath warmed her ear.
The temperature drop in here is unnatural.
Claire nodded, noticing how the frost had begun to form patterns on the walls that seemed too orderly, too deliberate to be random.
"It's at least 20 degrees colder in here than the kitchen."
They followed the trail together, step by cautious step. The door to the storage closet stood slightly ajar, darkness yawning beyond it. Claire's flashlight beam wavered slightly as her hand trembled. Not from fear, she told herself, but from the cold. Archer must have noticed. His fingers closed around her free hand, squeezing gently.
I'm right here,
he said, his voice low and steady.
Whatever's in there, we face it together.
The simple touch, the warmth of his skin against hers, steadied her more than she cared to admit. Claire drew strength from it, from him, as she called out again. Dr. Garfield. Her voice steady despite the fear clutching at her throat. A low rhythmic murmuring answered. Words in a language Claire didn't recognize. chanted in Dr. Garfield's unmistakable voice, though altered now, deeper, and somehow hollow. The sound raised goosebumps along her arms that had nothing to do with the cold. Not that Claire exchanged a look with Archer before pushing the door fully open, her flashlight illuminating the scene within. Dr. Garfield knelt in the center of the small space, his white shirt soaked through with blood from self-inflicted cuts across his palms and forearms. Around him on the wooden floor, he had painted intricate symbols in his own blood, symbols that matched those they'd discovered in the cellar, but arranged in new patterns that seemed to pulse and shift in the beam of their flashlights.
My God,
Archer whispered beside her, his grip on her hand tightening. Dr. Garfield didn't acknowledge their presence, continuing his monotonous chant as his bloody fingers traced another symbol on the floor. His eyes, when they caught the light, were completely black, as though the pupils had expanded to swallow both iris and white.
Doctor,
Claire said firmly, stepping forward despite every instinct screaming at her to run.
stop this! You're hurting yourself!
The doctor's head snapped up at the sound of her voice, movements jerky and unnatural, like a marionette controlled by inexpert hands. When he spoke, his voice seemed to come from somewhere far away, hollow and echoing as if traveling through a vast, empty space.
The circle must be completed.
He intoned.
The binding must be restored before midnight, before they fully awaken.
who, Doctor?
Archer asked, moving to stand beside Claire. His shoulder brushed against hers, the brief contact sending warmth through her despite the bone-deep chill of the room.
What are you trying to bind?
Dr. Garfield laughed, a terrible, broken sound that seemed to crack the air around them.
Not who. What? The ancients. The hungry ones. They've been waiting, watching from the spaces between.
His blackened eyes fixed on Claire with unsettling intensity.
Your grandfather knew. That's why he tried to stop us. But Harold Whitmore wanted power, and Catherine.
His voice broke, something like grief flashing across his transformed face.
Catherine paid the price for our arrogance.
Claire felt Archer tense beside her at the mention of his aunt. Without thinking, she reached for his hand, her fingers closing around his. His skin was warm despite the cold, his pulse racing beneath her fingertips.
What happened to Catherine?
Archer asked, his voice tight with emotion.
Sacrifice.
Dr. Garfield whispered.
Harold said we needed a willing sacrifice, but she wasn't willing. Not when she discovered the truth.
He looked down at the bloody symbols surrounding him, his fingers still moving in patterns too precise to be madness.
Too late. We realized Harold had deceived us all. The ritual wasn't to bind power to us. It was to bind something ancient to this place, something that had been sleeping in these mountains for centuries.
And now it's waking up.
Claire said, the pieces falling into place like a nightmare puzzle.
Because the circle was broken.
Dr. Garfield nodded frantically.
The binding weakens each year on the anniversary. Harold knew this. He planned it all. Catherine's death, the false ritual, everything.
His hands moved faster now, painting more symbols on the floor, his blood flowing freely from the self-inflicted wounds.
I tried to forget, to bury it in medicine and routine. But it called to me in my dreams. It showed me what was coming if the circle remained broken another year.
Archer squeezed Claire's hand before releasing it, kneeling to examine the symbols without touching them.
These are different from the ones downstairs.
He observed.
More complex.
The true binding.
Dr. Garfield confirmed.
Not Harold's perversion. The ones your grandfather discovered after researching for years, Claire. The ones that might actually work.
Claire felt a shiver run through her that had nothing to do with the cold.
My grandfather was investigating this all along.
He knew something wasn't right about Catherine's death.
The doctor continued, his movements becoming more frantic as his strength visibly waned.
He found texts, ancient writings about the entities that once lived in these mountains. Entities that feed on pain, on fear, on death.
How do you know all this?
Archer demanded, rising to stand protectively near Claire once more. Dr. Garfield's black eyes fixed on them both, the emptiness in them seeming to stretch infinitely.
Because he came to me before he died. Showed me his research. made me promise to complete the circle if the time ever came.
A tear traced a path through the blood on his cheek.
I was too much of a coward then. But now,
The doctor suddenly slumped forward, his strength finally giving out. Claire and Archer rushed to him, easing him onto his back. His breathing came in shallow gasps, his skin alarmingly pale beneath the blood and dirt like parchment stretched too thin over bone.
We need to get him warm,
Claire said, already shrugging off her outer layer to place over him. Archer nodded, helping her move the doctor away from the bloody symbols on the floor. His hands were steady, his movements efficient, but Claire could see the storm of emotions in his eyes. Confusion, fear, and something deeper, more personal. The search for his aunt's fate had brought him here, and now the answers were unfolding in ways no one could have anticipated. As they lifted him, Dr. Garfield's eyes flew open once more, his hand clutching at Claire's arm with surprising strength. His fingers left smears of blood on her sleeve, oddly warm against the freezing air.
the cabin,
He gasped, each word seeming to cost him dearly.
the logs. Harold Whitmore chose this place because the trees.
He struggled for breath, his chest heaving with effort.
The trees were fed with blood, centuries of sacrifices, native tribes. They knew. They stayed away, warned the settlers.
His grip slackened, consciousness fading. Together, Claire and Archer carried him back to the main room, where the others waited, faces tight with worry and fear. They placed him near the fire, Preston immediately moving to check his wounds.
What happened to him?
Eliza asked, her voice small with horror. Claire found herself drawn to Archer's side, seeking his warmth, his steadiness in the face of mounting impossibility. When his arm brushed against hers, it felt like the most natural thing in the world to lean into the touch, to accept the small comfort offered in the midst of madness.
He knows about Catherine,
Archer murmured to her, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear.
about what happened 30 years ago.
Claire nodded, watching as Preston tended to the doctor's self-inflicted wounds with a gentleness that belied his earlier gruffness.
And he thinks it's happening again, that whatever was bound here is breaking free.
You believe him?
Archer asked, turning to face her. In the golden firelight, his eyes were deep and searching, looking at her as if she might hold answers to questions he hadn't even formed yet. Claire thought of her grandfather's cryptic notes, the feeling that had drawn her to this cabin in the first place.
I believe he believes it.
She said carefully.
And after what we've seen tonight,
Archer's hand found hers again, fingers intertwining with deliberate intent this time.
I came here looking for the truth about my aunt.
He said.
I'm starting to think that truth is stranger and darker than anything I imagined.
truth often is.
Claire replied softly. She was acutely aware of how close they stood, of the warmth of his hand around hers, of how his presence had become an anchor in the storm of impossibilities swirling around them. In the space of a single night, this man had transformed from stranger to something essential, a partner in the face of unknown terrors. Archer's eyes dropped to her lips for the briefest moment before returning to her eyes.
When this is over,
A sudden cracking sound drew their attention to the window. Frost was spreading across the glass at an impossible rate, forming not random patterns but distinct symbols that matched those Dr. Garfield had painted in his blood.
It's getting stronger.
James whispered, pulling Eliza closer to him. Claire found herself moving instinctively toward Archer, drawn to his strength, his steadiness in the face of mounting impossibility. He met her halfway, his hand finding hers in the dim light.
We need to finish what Dr. Garfield started.
Claire said, her voice stronger than she felt.
We need to complete the circle.
Archer's fingers tightened around hers.
you believe all this?
Claire looked up at him, and at the face that had somehow become a lifeline in the midst of nightmare.
I believe something terrible happened here 30 years ago. I believe it involved your aunt and my grandfather. And I believe it's happening again now.
The corner of Archer's mouth lifted in a wry half-smile that somehow made her heart beat faster despite their dire circumstances.
When you put it like that.
The old grandfather clock in the corner chose that moment to chime, the sound unnaturally loud in the tense silence. 10 o'clock. 2 hours until midnight. 2 hours to uncover secrets buried for 3 decades and prevent whatever horror was clawing its way into their reality. In the brief moment of shared silence that followed, Claire felt Archer's thumb trace a small circle on the back of her hand, a gesture so tender, so at odds with their surroundings that it almost broke her composure entirely. Instead, she met his eyes and saw in them a promise whatever came next, they would face it together. Chapter 8. The Caretaker's Curse. Claire's descent down the narrow stone staircase had been guided by instinct and desperation. The others had scattered throughout the cabin searching for Dr. Garfield, but something, a whisper just below conscious hearing, a pull like gravity, had drawn her to the loose floorboard in the pantry that no one else had noticed. Archer had followed without question, his hand firm on her shoulder as they discovered the passage that shouldn't exist. Now they stood frozen at the entrance to a chamber that defied explanation. A room larger than should be possible beneath the cabin's foundation, walls lined with strange carvings that matched the symbols Dr. Garfield had drawn in his own blood. The air here felt different, heavier, as though time itself moved more sluggishly. Claire's breath formed small clouds in front of her face as the temperature dropped further with each step they took. The worn stone steps beneath their feet bore traces of use far older than the cabin itself. Smooth depressions where countless footfalls had eroded the rock over what must have been centuries.
Claire,
Archer whispered, his voice tight with warning as his fingers gripped her elbow.
look.
And at the center of it all stood Emerson Hughes, the cabin's caretaker they'd all assumed had left before the storm turned his head slowly toward them, lips curling into a smile that transformed his previously unremarkable features into something predatory. Blood-stained hands hung loosely at his sides. The crimson streaks appeared almost black in the flickering light of candles arranged in a perfect circle around him.
Claire Winters,
He said, her name sounding wrong in his mouth.
I knew you'd find your way down here eventually. It's in your blood, after all.
Claire felt Archer tense beside her, his body shifting slightly to place himself between her and Emerson. The protective gesture sent a warm current through her veins. Despite the cellar's bone-deep chill, she found herself leaning into his warmth, the solid presence of him somehow making this nightmare feel survivable. She'd known him for less than 48 hours, yet in this moment, she trusted him more than people she'd known for years.
What have you done with Dr. Garfield?
Claire demanded, fighting to keep her voice steady. Emerson's smile widened, revealing teeth too perfect, too white.
The good doctor is helping prepare for tonight's ceremony. He's been fighting it for 30 years, but some roles can't be denied.
He gestured toward the far corner where Dr. Garfield knelt, eyes black and empty, hands methodically arranging objects in a pattern Claire couldn't comprehend. The elderly doctor's movements were jerky, puppet-like. Even from this distance, Claire could see the unnatural dilation of his pupils, the vacancy behind his eyes that suggested whatever was moving his limbs wasn't entirely human anymore.
You never left before the storm,
Archer said, his voice tight with controlled anger. His hand found Claire's in the darkness, fingers intertwining with hers so naturally that it felt like they'd been doing this for years. The small contact gave her courage, grounding her when everything else seemed to be slipping away.
Very good, Mr. Reed.
Emerson clapped his hands slowly, the sound unnaturally loud in the underground chamber. Each clap seemed to hang in the air, lasting longer than it should.
I needed everyone here, the original participants in my mother's murder, and you,
His eyes fixed on Claire with unsettling intensity.
the daughter of the man who covered it up.
Claire felt the blood drain from her face.
Your mother?
Catherine Reed.
Emerson replied, watching Archer's face carefully.
Yes, your beloved aunt was more than she appeared. My father kept us well hidden, his embarrassing secret family tucked away in Blackwater Falls while he maintained his respectable life elsewhere, until she threatened to expose everything.
Archer's fingers tightened around Claire's, his thumb drawing small circles against her skin. The gentle motion felt impossibly tender amid such horror. Claire found herself drawing strength from it. From him, this man she was quickly coming to need in ways that frightened and thrilled her.
That's impossible. My aunt never had a child.
Archer said, but doubt had crept into his voice. Claire watched as his certainty wavered, his expression shifting as he studied Emerson's face. Was there something familiar there? a resemblance Claire couldn't see but that Archer might recognize.
Oh, but she did.
Emerson countered, moving toward an altar-like structure Claire hadn't noticed before. On it sat photographs, old letters, and a worn journal.
Your family never knew about me, about us. My father made certain of that until he no longer needed her silence.
The altar was crafted from rough-hewn wood that matched nothing in the cabin above. Its surface was stained dark with what Claire feared wasn't just the patina of age. The photographs were arranged in a semicircle, faded images of a younger Catherine Reed, her smile bright and untroubled. The woman Archer had described so fondly just hours earlier over whiskey by the fireplace. Archer's hand slipped from Claire's as he took a half-step forward, drawn by the photographs. The sudden absence of his touch felt like a physical loss. She wanted to pull him back, to keep him close where she could protect him, or perhaps where he could protect her. Their connection, so new and unexpected, had become her only certainty in this impossible place beneath the earth. Claire's training kicked in, keeping her voice calm despite her racing heart.
You believe Harold Whitmore was your father?
I don't believe it. I know it.
Emerson snarled, his composed facade cracking.
He arranged everything. The ritual, the Origin Society, all of it. A blood sacrifice disguised as an accident to bind ancient powers to his will.
He ran his fingers lovingly over the journal.
But he didn't understand what he was dealing with. No one did. Except perhaps your grandfather, Claire. He came close to the truth.
Claire felt Archer's hand find hers in the darkness, fingers intertwining with quiet strength. The simple contact steadied her as reality seemed to shift beneath her feet. His palm was warm against her cold skin, calloused in places from his work. She'd noticed his hands earlier, artist's hands, she'd thought, and now they offered silent comfort as though they'd been doing so for years rather than seconds.
Thomas Winters wasn't a fool.
Emerson continued, opening the journal to reveal pages covered in handwriting Claire recognized with a jolt. Her grandfather's distinctive script, the letters slanted sharply to the right.
He suspected something was wrong about Catherine's death from the beginning, started asking questions no one wanted answered.
My grandfather knew Catherine?
Claire whispered.
Oh, more than knew her,
Emerson said with a cruel smile.
He loved her. Another secret that never made it into the official record. They were planning to leave together, Catherine, Thomas, and me. Start fresh somewhere Harold couldn't reach us.
Archer's fingers tightened around Claire's almost painfully. She glanced at him, saw the storm of emotions crossing his face as years of family history unraveled and rewove itself into a darker pattern.
What do you want from us?
Archer asked, his voice low and dangerous. Emerson's smile returned, terrible in its childlike eagerness.
I want to finish what was started 30 years ago, the proper way this time.
He turned to the altar, lifting a curved knife that gleamed coldly in the candlelight. The blade bore inscriptions along its surface, symbols that matched those carved into the walls.
A proper sacrifice, a proper ritual, and then my mother will return to me.
As if responding to his words, the temperature in the chamber dropped suddenly. Frost began forming on the stone walls, creating patterns that mimicked the carved symbols. The candle flames dimmed, then flared blue for an instant before returning to their normal golden hue.
You're insane,
Claire whispered.
Am I?
Emerson asked, genuinely curious.
Then how do you explain what's happening in this cabin? The visions, the whispers, the presence growing stronger with each passing hour?
He gestured around them.
These mountains have always been a thin place, a boundary where what lies beyond can reach through. The native tribes knew it. The earliest settlers knew it. Your grandfather knew it.
With a swift movement that belied his unassuming appearance, Emerson produced a gun from behind the altar, aiming it casually between Claire and Archer.
I've been watching you all,
he continued, almost conversational now.
The cameras were simple to install during renovations. The listening devices even easier. I know about your growing feelings for each other. How poetic that a Winters and a Reed should find connection in the very place their families were torn apart.
Claire felt heat rise to her cheeks despite the danger. Beside her, Archer's hand tightened around hers, a silent confirmation that made her heart stutter against her ribs. She tried to dismiss the pull between them as adrenaline, as the natural result of isolation and danger. But it was more than that. They both knew it.
You heard us talking earlier
Archer said.
about my aunt's research.
I heard everything.
Emerson confirmed.
Your late-night conversation by the fire, your theories about what happened here, even your little moment on the stairs.
His smile was knowing, mocking.
Did you think that pull between you was a coincidence? It's blood calling to blood. History repeating itself.
You orchestrated everything,
Archer said, his voice tight.
gathering everyone here during the anniversary of Catherine's death, the storm.
The storm was fortunate timing,
Emerson interrupted.
though these mountains have their own way of keeping secrets.
He checked an antique pocket watch.
Nearly 11. The witching hour approaches, and with it, the moment the veil is thinnest.
As if responding to his words, a low moan seemed to emanate from the very walls around them. The sound raised goosebumps along Claire's arms, primal and wrong.
Listen!
Emerson's face transformed with religious fervor.
She's coming! My mother is coming home!
Claire's tactical mind raced, cataloging their options, the distance to Emerson, the weapon in his hand. Archer must have been thinking similarly. She felt the subtle shift in his posture. The readiness humming through him. They'd need perfect timing and more than a little luck.
What exactly are you planning to do?
Claire asked, deliberately keeping her voice calm, stalling for time. Emerson's eyes gleamed with fanatical light.
Blood calls to blood. The original sacrifice was corrupted by Harold's greed, but I've spent years studying what he did wrong, what needs to be done differently.
He gestured to the walls.
These symbols were here long before the cabin, carved by those who understood the powers that sleep beneath these mountains.
As he spoke, Claire noticed something alarming. A dark, viscous liquid beginning to seep through the walls, trickling down in slow rivulets that followed the carved symbols. It moved, with unnatural purpose, like something sentient.
The cabin is bleeding.
Archer whispered, horror evident in his voice.
Not the cabin.
Emerson corrected almost gently.
What lies within the cabin? The logs your grandfather harvested weren't ordinary trees, Claire. They grew from soil soaked in centuries of blood sacrifice. They absorbed what was offered to the mountains. And now they're awakening.
The seeping liquid reached the floor, flowing toward the circle of candles in defiance of gravity and natural law. Dr. Garfield's chanting grew louder, more urgent, though he remained unnaturally still in his corner.
You can't possibly believe this will bring Catherine back,
Archer said, his voice steadier than Claire would have thought possible given the circumstances. Something softened in Emerson's expression. A flash of the lonely, desperate child he must have been.
Not just Catherine. All of them. Everyone the mountain has claimed. Everyone whose blood feeds the trees.
His eyes fixed on Claire with terrifying intensity.
Including your father, Claire. Wouldn't you like to ask him why he buried the truth? Why he let my mother's killers walk free?
The question struck Claire like a physical blow. The possibility of seeing her father again, of understanding the choices that had haunted him until his death. It was a temptation that wrapped around her heart with surprising strength, years of questions that had gone unanswered, the hollow space of grief that had never fully closed. Archer must have felt her momentary wavering. His thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand, drawing her back to the present. To him, the small gesture spoke volumes. I'm here. I understand. Don't listen to him.
Whatever you're planning won't bring anyone back,
Claire said firmly.
It will only cause more death.
Death is merely transition.
Emerson replied, waving his free hand dismissively.
The boundary between worlds thins at midnight on the anniversary. With the proper offering, the proper words.
His gaze traveled between them, calculating.
The bloodline of those who covered the truth and the bloodline of the victim. Symmetry. Balance. That's the key my father never understood.
With sickening clarity, Claire realized what he was saying.
You need us, a Winters and a Reed.
Emerson's smile widened.
Very good, Claire. I knew you'd understand. It's why I brought you here, after all.
You didn't bring me here,
Claire argued.
I came to stock the cabin before.
Before the guests arrived. Yes, that's what you believe.
Emerson laughed softly.
But who do you think requested you specifically? Who made sure your wilderness guide service was contracted for this particular job? Everything has been orchestrated, Claire, every moment leading to this night.
The revelation sent a chill through Claire that had nothing to do with the freezing temperature of the chamber. How long had Emerson been watching her, manipulating events to bring her here? The thought of being observed, studied, selected made her skin crawl.
And what about me?
Archer asked, his voice tight.
Was I part of your plan all along, too?
Oh, Mr. Reed.
Emerson said with a pitying smile.
Your presence was the easiest to arrange. All it took was anonymously sending your publisher those photographs of Catherine's research notes. I knew your obsession with your aunt's death would bring you running.
His eyes gleamed.
Your entire career writing about unsolved mysteries, always circling back to the one that touched your own family. So predictable.
Archer's jaw clenched, and Claire could feel the tension radiating from him. It was true. He told her just yesterday how he'd received an envelope of never-before-seen documents related to his aunt's research, documents that had convinced him to join the gathering at the cabin. The seeping liquid from the walls had now reached the center of the room, pooling in a perfect circle that mirrored the arrangement of candles. The air grew thick with a copper smell that caught in the back of Claire's throat.
It's time to begin,
Emerson said softly, raising the knife.
Dr. Garfield has prepared the way. Now we complete what was started 30 years ago.
Without warning, the liquid on the floor burst into flame, a perfect circle of fire that cast grotesque shadows across the chamber walls. In the sudden increased light, Claire could see symbols painted in blood covering the floor beneath their feet, extending outward in complex patterns.
My God.
Archer breathed beside her.
These are the same symbols from the photographs in my aunt's research. She was studying them before she died.
Emerson nodded, pleased.
Your aunt understood more than most. She discovered what Harold was really attempting, not to gain power, but to awaken something ancient, something hungry. She tried to stop him, to warn the others.
His expression hardened.
She paid the price for her interference.
Outside the circle of fire, Dr. Garfield rose to his feet with jerky, unnatural movements. His lips continued moving in that endless chant, but his black eyes were fixed on Claire and Archer with terrible hunger.
She's coming through him first,
Emerson whispered, reverent,
using him as a vessel until the way is fully opened.
Claire felt Archer's arm wrap around her waist, pulling her closer to his side. The protective gesture made her heart race despite their dire circumstances. They were trapped between Emerson's gun and whatever was happening to Dr. Garfield, with the circle of flames preventing escape.
We need to stop this,
Archer murmured against her ear, his breath warm against her skin.
Whatever he's planning, whatever he believes, this is wrong.
The tactical part of her brain noted the deteriorating structural integrity of the chamber, the ancient beams groaning under the weight of the cabin above, the widening cracks in the stone walls where the viscous liquid continued to seep through.
The cabin is becoming unstable,
She whispered back, her lips barely moving.
If we could trigger a collapse.
Archer's hand tightened on her waist, understanding without further explanation. His eyes met hers, and in that moment of silent communication, Claire felt something shift between them, a deepening of the connection that had been building since they first met. If they survived this, there would be much to explore, but first, they had to stop whatever terrible awakening Emerson had set in motion before it consumed them all. Chapter 9, Shadows Reborn.
We don't have much time,
Claire whispered, her voice barely audible above Dr. Garfield's monotonous chanting. Her fingers tightened around Archer's wrist, the warmth of his skin against hers sending a flutter through her chest despite the unnatural cold permeating the chamber. The air hung thick with incense and fear, the stone walls around them seeming to breathe with ancient malice. Claire felt each heartbeat thudding against her ribs as Emerson stepped closer, the ritual knife gleaming in the firelight. Its curved edge caught the flame's reflection, sending fractured light dancing across the damp walls.
The blood of a Winters, the blood of a Reed. Together, you'll complete what began 30 years ago.
Emerson's face, once unremarkable, had transformed. Sharp angles catching shadows that shouldn't exist, eyes reflecting flames that seemed to burn from within. Claire studied him, noting the fevered glint in his gaze, the way his fingers trembled slightly around the knife's handle despite his confident tone. Behind her, water dripped somewhere in rhythmic counterpoint to Dr. Garfield's words, each drop marking seconds they couldn't afford to waste.
This is madness,
Archer said, placing himself slightly in front of Claire. The protective gesture sent warmth blooming across her chest despite their dire circumstances. His shoulders formed a barrier between her and Emerson, broad and steady. Claire found herself fixating on the way Archer's dark hair curled slightly at his nape, damp with perspiration. Despite the chamber's chill, she wanted to reach out and touch it, to run her fingers through those soft waves. The thought seemed absurdly important amid the horror surrounding them.
Is it madness to honor ancient promises?
Emerson asked, his voice taking on a dreamlike quality.
Your bloodlines have always been meant for this moment. Every generation of Winters, every branch of the Reed family, all paths converging here.
Claire's gaze darted to her grandfather's journal on the altar. If they could reach it, decipher whatever Thomas Winters had discovered all those years ago. The leather-bound book lay open, its pages covered in her grandfather's distinctive slanted handwriting, diagrams intersecting with hurried notes in the margins.
Your grandfather knew the truth about this place.
Emerson said, following her gaze.
He understood what sleeps beneath these mountains, what Harold Whitmore awakened through my mother's death.
Claire felt Archer shift beside her, his arm pressing against hers in silent comfort. The simple contact sent electricity through her skin, awakening nerve endings she hadn't known existed. She fought the urge to lean into him, to draw strength from his nearness.
Catherine was trying to stop it.
Archer said quietly, a muscle working in his jaw.
She wasn't a willing sacrifice.
Emerson's face contorted briefly, pain flashing across his features before settling back into fanatical certainty.
My mother understood sacrifice. She knew what was required to bridge worlds.
A violent tremor shook the chamber, sending dust and small stones cascading from the ceiling. The cabin above groaned in protest, a living thing in pain. The sound reverberated through the stone floor, traveling up through Claire's feet and settling in her bones like a warning.
The structure's compromised.
Claire murmured against Archer's shoulder.
We could use that.
His cotton shirt felt soft against her lips as she spoke, the fabric carrying his scent. Pine and something uniquely his. Warm and steadying. Claire hadn't meant to lean so close, but found herself reluctant to pull away. The curve of his neck was inches from her mouth, and she felt an almost overwhelming desire to press her lips against it. Archer's slight nod confirmed he understood. His hand found hers in the flickering darkness, fingers intertwining with quiet strength. The simple touch calmed her racing heart, anchoring her when everything else seemed to be slipping away. His thumb traced small circles on her palm, each one a promise.
You really believe this ritual will bring Catherine back?
Archer asked, his voice deliberately louder now, drawing Emerson's attention while Claire surveyed the chamber's weak points. The ceiling above them was spider-webbed with cracks, ancient beams groaning under pressure never meant to last decades. Dark liquid seeped from between stone blocks, viscous and wrong, defying gravity as it moved across the wall's surface.
Not just Catherine.
Emerson replied, eyes feverish with devotion.
Everyone the mountain has claimed. The boundaries between worlds grow thinnest at midnight on the anniversary. With the proper sacrifice...
It won't work,
interrupted a new voice from the stairway. The words cut through the chamber like a blade, silencing even Dr. Garfield's persistent chanting. All heads turned to see Preston Whitmore descending into the chamber, his normally impeccable appearance disheveled, blood trickling from a cut above his eye. In his hands, he clutched a worn leather portfolio that Claire recognized from her father's study years ago. The firelight caught the silver at Preston's temples, casting his features in stark relief, revealing the haunted look of a man confronting nightmares he'd spent decades trying to outrun.
Father tried this before.
Preston continued, stepping carefully around the edge of the flame circle.
It didn't bring anyone back. It only bound them here, trapped between worlds.
Emerson's face contorted with rage.
You know nothing about what your father accomplished.
I know everything.
Preston countered, his voice surprisingly steady.
I've spent 30 years trying to undo what he started.
He turned to Claire and Archer.
My father deceived everyone. The Origin Society wasn't about preserving history or protecting the old ways. It was about power, harnessing something ancient that should have remained dormant.
Claire felt Archer's breathing quicken against her side, his warmth seeping through her clothes, steadying her even as the ground beneath them trembled again. The vibration traveled up through her bones, setting her teeth on edge. Something was changing. The air itself seemed to thicken, pressing against her skin like invisible hands.
The journal,
Claire whispered, nodding toward the altar.
we need it.
Archer's eyes met hers, a silent understanding passing between them. Without words, they'd formed a connection that felt impossibly deep for the brief time they'd known each other. As though some part of her had been waiting for him, recognizing him when he arrived. His gaze was steady, the green of his eyes catching firelight like forest leaves dappled by sunset. Claire found herself wanting to reach up, to trace the line of his jaw with her fingertips, to feel the slight roughness of stubble against her skin. The inappropriate timing of such thoughts made her cheeks flush warm despite the chamber's chill.
Your father was a fool.
Emerson spat at Preston.
He performed the ritual incorrectly. The sacrifice requires willing participants from both bloodlines.
His gaze shifted between Claire and Archer.
A Winters and a Reed joined in purpose?
That's not true.
Preston said, opening the portfolio.
My father's notes detail everything. The ritual was never meant to bring anyone back. It was designed to bind an ancient entity to his will. Catherine discovered his true intentions and tried to stop him.
Pages rustled as Preston handled the portfolio, yellowed with age and stained with substances Claire didn't want to identify. The smell of old paper mingled with the chamber's dank atmosphere, surprisingly comforting in its ordinariness. Claire inched closer to Archer, her fingertips brushing his palm. The contact sent electricity coursing through her veins, a reminder that amid this nightmare, something beautiful and unexpected had taken root. His skin was warm against hers, calloused in places that spoke of practical work, so different from the academic men she typically surrounded herself with.
Thomas Winters suspected the truth.
Preston continued.
That's why Harold made sure the sheriff had covered up Catherine's death. Not just to hide murder, but to conceal what was awakening beneath the cabin.
Another violent tremor shook the chamber, stronger than before. Cracks spiderwebbed across the ceiling, and the dark liquid seeping from the walls flowed faster now. It gathered in puddles on the stone floor, reflecting the firelight in ways that made no sense, showing depths that couldn't exist in such shallow pools.
The mountains have always kept secrets,
Claire murmured, remembering her grandfather's words from childhood visits.
Some stones should be left unturned.
Archer's hand closed fully around hers now, his grip firm yet gentle.
My mother used to say something similar. She never explained why she left Blackwood Ridge, but she warned me never to return.
And yet here you are.
Claire said softly, finding unexpected comfort in the coincidence. His thumb traced gentle circles against her wrist, the gesture both soothing and startlingly intimate.
Here I am.
He agreed, his voice low enough that only she could hear.
Perhaps some forces are stronger than warnings.
It's too late to stop what's coming.
Emerson said, his smile terrible in its certainty.
The way is opening. She's almost here.
Dr. Garfield's chanting reached a fever pitch, his body swaying unnaturally as the black liquid pooled around his feet. The elderly doctor's eyes remained completely black, reflecting nothing, absorbing all light. His movements had become jerky, puppet-like, as though invisible strings pulled at his limbs.
Claire.
Archer whispered, his lips close to her ear, sending shivers down her spine despite their dire circumstances.
The support beams.
She followed his gaze to the ancient wooden beams that seemed to groan under increasing pressure. The liquid had reached them now, soaking into the wood that appeared to pulse and contract like living tissue. Each beam held centuries of weight above them, the mountain itself pressing down, eager to reclaim what had been carved from its flesh.
If we can trigger a collapse.
She left the thought unfinished, but Archer's nod told her he understood.
You need to see this.
Preston said, approaching them with Harold Whitmore's portfolio.
There's a counterspell, a way to close what was opened. But it requires acknowledging the truth of what happened here.
Claire reached for the weathered pages, her fingers brushing Preston's as she took the portfolio. The contact felt cold compared to Archer's warmth beside her. As her eyes scanned the faded handwriting, recognition bloomed. Some of these notes were in her father's hand, additions made to Harold's original text.
My father was trying to stop this,
She whispered, pieces falling into place.
He knew what was happening, but couldn't prevent it alone.
Her father's absence from her life, his sudden disappearances, late-night phone calls, and distracted silence during their rare time together, suddenly made terrible sense. He hadn't abandoned his responsibilities. He'd been carrying a burden she hadn't known existed. Archer peered over her shoulder, his chest pressed against her back, his breath warm against her neck. The intimate position felt oddly natural, as if they'd stood this way countless times before Claire found herself leaning into him, drawing strength from his solid presence.
Look at this,
He murmured, pointing to a diagram that matched the symbols carved into the chamber walls.
Catherine was documenting the same patterns. She wasn't participating in the ritual. She was trying to reverse it.
His finger traced the intricate design on the page, following the same path Claire's thoughts had taken. The synchronicity between them sent a fresh wave of warmth through her body, settling low in her stomach with unexpected intensity. Claire turned her head slightly, finding Archer's face inches from hers. In his eyes, she saw determination mingled with something deeper, something that made her heart race despite their dire circumstances. For a fleeting moment, the horror surrounding them receded, leaving only this connection, this impossible, perfect understanding between two people who should have been strangers.
We were meant to find this,
She said softly, the certainty settling into her bones.
not for Emerson's ritual, but to finish what our families started.
Archer's gaze dropped briefly to her lips, his pupils dilating slightly.
To close the circle, not complete it.
The air between them seemed to crackle with possibility, with unspoken words and unfulfilled touches. Claire found herself swaying toward him, drawn by something stronger than conscious thought. Emerson's voice shattered the moment.
Enough. The hour approaches.
He raised the ritual knife, moving toward them with purpose.
The circle must be completed with blood freely given.
The knife's blade caught firelight, transforming it from metal to liquid flame in his grip. Claire felt Archer tense beside her, muscles coiling in preparation to defend against the threat.
Or with truth freely spoken.
Preston countered, stepping forward.
The original ritual was corrupted by lies. Each participant believed they were honoring ancient traditions, preserving history. None knew they were feeding something hungry, something patient.
He turned to face Emerson directly.
Including your mother.
Emerson faltered, confusion flickering across his features.
What are you talking about?
Catherine Reed wasn't just your mother.
Preston said gently.
She was my father's conscience. The only person who could reach whatever humanity remained in him. When she discovered what he planned to do with the ritual, she tried to stop him.
He glanced at Archer.
That's why she gathered all that research. She was looking for a way to counter whatever my father had set in motion.
Claire felt Archer tense beside her, his hand finding hers again, squeezing gently. She returned the pressure, offering what comfort she could while her mind raced through the implications of Preston's words. The pieces were fitting together now, a puzzle whose solution might save them all.
You're lying.
Emerson snarled, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. His hand trembled slightly, the knife no longer held with unwavering purpose. Something vulnerable flickered behind the madness in his eyes. The abandoned child seeking his mother's return.
Catherine left evidence.
Preston continued.
Letters, research notes, journals, all documenting her discovery of what the Origins Society truly was. My father found them after her death and kept them along with this.
He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small, worn photograph. The photograph's edges were soft with handling, its colors faded by time and touch. Preston held it with reverence, as though it contained more than mere paper and chemicals, as though it held truth that words alone couldn't convey. Emerson stared at the image, his composure cracking further.
Where did you get this?
My father's safe. It was with Catherine's letters.
Preston held out the photograph.
Read what's written on the back.
With shaking hands, Emerson accepted the photograph. As he turned it over, Claire took the opportunity to scan the chamber again, noting the widening cracks in the ceiling, the increasing flow of the black liquid. They were running out of time. The liquid now moved with purpose, streaming toward the center of the chamber where Dr. Garfield continued his mindless chanting. It pooled around his feet, rising slowly up his ankles, seeming to absorb into his skin. The doctor's voice had taken on a strange dual quality, as though two throats produced the sound simultaneously.
It can't be true.
Emerson whispered, his voice suddenly childlike.
She wouldn't have...
The chamber shuddered violently, cutting off his words. A large chunk of ceiling broke free, crashing to the floor mere feet from where they stood. The circle of flames flared higher, its heat intense against Claire's skin.
We need to complete the counterspell.
Preston urged, turning to Claire and Archer.
Both bloodlines must acknowledge the truth and choose to close what was opened.
Claire looked down at her grandfather's journal, then up at Archer. In his eyes she found certainty. And something more. Something that made her breath catch despite the chaos surrounding them. The emotion reflected there was too new, too fragile to name, yet undeniable in its intensity.
Together,
Archer said softly, his gaze never leaving hers. The word carried weight beyond its simple syllables, promising more than just partnership in this moment of crisis. Claire felt it settle around her shoulders like a mantle, both burden and gift. She nodded, warmth spreading through her chest.
Together.
They stepped forward in unison, approaching the altar where Emerson stood frozen, staring at the photograph in his hands. The ritual knife lay abandoned beside Catherine's faded images.
It requires blood freely given,
Preston explained.
and truth freely spoken.
Without hesitation, Archer reached for the knife. Claire watched as he drew the blade across his palm, a thin line of red welling up against his skin. The casual confidence of his movement spoke of absolute trust in himself, in the ritual, in her. When he offered her the knife, handle first, their fingers brushed. The simple contact sent electricity coursing through Claire's veins, a connection that transcended the horror surrounding them. She accepted the blade, her eyes never leaving his.
For truth?
She whispered, drawing the knife across her own palm. The sting was brief, insignificant compared to the weight of what they faced. As their blood dripped onto the ancient symbols carved into the altar, Archer's hand found hers once more. Their fingers intertwined, blood mingling between their palms, a Winters and a Reed, joined in purpose and in something deeper, something neither had expected to find in this place of darkness.
I acknowledge the truth of what happened here.
Archer began, his voice steady despite the chamber shaking around them.
Catherine Reed was murdered to feed something ancient and hungry. Her death was used to open a door that should have remained closed.
Claire squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his presence beside her.
I acknowledge that Thomas Winters covered the truth, hiding evidence that might have stopped this sooner. His silence allowed darkness to grow beneath these mountains.
As they spoke, the flames surrounding them shifted, their color changing from orange to blue. Dr. Garfield's chanting faltered, then stopped altogether, the elderly doctor collapsing to the ground with a soft moan. The chamber trembled again, more violently. Chapter 10. The Reckoning. The chamber's violent shudder knocked Preston off balance, sending him stumbling into the altar. Ancient artifacts clattered to the stone floor, the noise swallowed by the mountain's deep groan. Above them, the cabin's foundation creaked in protest as another support beam cracked, showering them with dust and splinters.
It's fighting back.
Claire shouted over the rumble, her fingers tightening around Archer's. Their mingled blood dripped steadily onto the carved symbols, which now glowed with a faint blue luminosity.
Whatever's been trapped here doesn't want to leave.
The blue light caught in Archer's eyes as he pulled her closer, his arm wrapping protectively around her waist. Claire felt his warmth seep through the layers of her clothing, his touch igniting something primal within her that made her heart flutter. Despite the danger, his proximity brought a strange calm amid the chaos, as if they were standing in the eye of a storm.
We need to complete the circle.
he said, his lips close to her ear. His breath warmed her skin, sending shivers down her spine that had nothing to do with fear.
The counterspell requires both bloodlines acknowledging the past and choosing a different future.
Claire nodded, acutely aware of the strength in his hands, the solidness of his chest against her shoulder. When had this man, this stranger, become her anchor? How had he slipped past her carefully constructed walls in mere days? The chamber walls trembled again. Claire stumbled forward, but Archer's steady grip kept her upright, his fingers intertwining with hers more tightly. She found herself studying the sharp angle of his jaw, the intensity in his eyes that made her forget momentarily that the world was crumbling around them.
"Stay with me,"
he whispered so softly she almost missed it beneath the mountain's rage. The naked vulnerability in his voice caught her off guard. This man who'd faced countless dangers now looked at her as though she might vanish like smoke. Across the chamber, Emerson had fallen to his knees, the photograph clutched against his chest. His face contorted with grief and betrayal as 30 years of purpose crumbled around him.
She was trying to stop it.
He whispered, the words barely audible above the mountain's angry protest.
My mother wasn't a willing sacrifice. She was trying to save everyone.
The revelation hung in the air, altering everything they thought they knew. Claire watched as tears carved clean tracks through the dust on Emerson's face, his entire world rewritten in an instant, her heart constricted with unexpected sympathy.
Everything he believed. All those years.
She murmured more to herself than to Archer.
"Sometimes the stories we tell ourselves are the hardest to unlearn,"
Archer replied softly, his thumb tracing small circles against her wrist. The gentle movement felt intimate, a private reassurance amid shared danger. The chamber walls continued to leak black liquid, the substance moving with unnatural purpose toward the center where Dr. Garfield lay unconscious. It crawled up his limbs like countless tiny insects, absorbing into his pallid skin with a sickening hiss.
We need to get him out of there,
Claire said, gesturing toward the doctor. Archer nodded, squeezing her hand before reluctantly releasing it. The absence of his touch left her feeling oddly vulnerable, as if a vital connection had been severed. She watched him move cautiously toward Dr. Garfield, navigating around the expanding puddles of darkness.
Be careful,
she called after him, her voice tight with fear she hadn't expected to feel for someone she barely knew. Yet the thought of harm coming to him twisted her stomach into knots. She realized, with startling clarity, that somewhere between their first heated argument and this moment of shared peril, Archer had become someone she couldn't bear to lose. The moment Archer's hand touched the doctor's shoulder, the chamber transformed. The black liquid surged upward, forming a barrier between them. Dr. Garfield's eyes snapped open, entirely black, reflecting nothing, and his mouth stretched into an impossible grin.
Too late,
he said, but the voice wasn't his. It held centuries of cold, of patience, of hunger.
The offering has been accepted.
The doctor's body began to twist, bones cracking audibly as his form distorted. Archer scrambled backward, horror etched across his features as Dr. Garfield's limbs elongated, skin splitting to reveal darkness underneath.
Get back!
Preston shouted, grabbing Archer's sleeve and pulling him away from the transforming figure. Claire's breath caught painfully in her throat as she watched, her fingers gripping the edge of the altar so tightly her knuckles turned white. The distance between her and Archer, mere steps across the chamber, felt like an unbridgeable chasm. She wanted to run to him, to pull him back to safety, but her legs refused to move. When Archer finally rejoined her at the altar, his hand finding hers with desperate certainty, relief flooded through her so intensely it made her dizzy. The warmth of his palm against hers felt like the first real thing in a world suddenly gone mad. His fingers interlaced with hers, thumb brushing over her knuckles in a gesture so tender it almost undid her completely.
The ritual.
Preston insisted, pointing to the journal.
You must complete it now.
Claire flipped frantically through her grandfather's journal with her free hand, searching for the counterspell's final components. The pages seemed to resist her touch, growing cold and slightly wet, as if the book itself were transforming along with the chamber.
It doesn't want us to find it,
she whispered, her voice shaking.
The entity. It's trying to stop us.
Archer leaned closer, his chest pressed against her back as he helped her search. The solid weight of him behind her sent a rush of warmth through her veins despite the chill of the room. His breath stirred her hair, and for one heartbeat, she forgot the horror unfolding before them.
Keep looking.
He urged, his voice low and steady against her ear.
Your grandfather left the answer for you, Claire. He believed you would find it.
His faith in her made her heart stutter in her chest. She'd known him less than a week, yet here he stood, risking everything alongside her, trusting her. The realization sent a flush of heat to her cheeks despite the danger surrounding them.
Here,
she said, finding a page marked with her father's distinctive handwriting. The diagram showed the same circular pattern that dominated the chamber floor, but with a crucial difference.
the original circle was left incomplete deliberately, not to invite something in, but to trap it between worlds.
Archer's breath warmed her neck as he studied the page over her shoulder. His nearness sent shivers across her skin that had nothing to do with fear.
So closing it doesn't invite the entity in. It pushes it out completely.
Exactly,
Claire confirmed, turning to meet his eyes. The green of his irises had darkened, flecked with gold in the chamber's dim light. Something powerful passed between them, something that made her heart race faster than any supernatural terror could.
We need to stand at the break in the circle and speak the binding words together.
Another violent tremor shook the chamber. Chunks of ceiling crashed down around them, narrowly missing Margot and the Fontaine siblings who huddled against the far wall, their faces pale with terror.
We're running out of time,
Preston warned, glancing nervously at the creature that had once been Dr. Garfield. It continued to transform, limbs splitting into multiple appendages that scratched at the stone floor with terrible purpose. The creature's movements reminded Claire of a spider, but wrong. Too many joints bending in impossible directions, too many limbs emerging from what had once been human flesh. The sight made her stomach heave, but she forced herself to look away, to focus instead on the man beside her. With a final squeeze of Claire's hand, Archer helped her to her feet. His touch lingered longer than necessary, and she found herself leaning into it, drawing strength from the contact. Together, they navigated around the edge of the chamber toward the incomplete segment of the circle. Each step brought them closer to the nightmare creature in the center, its black eyes following their movement with ancient hunger.
Don't look at it,
Archer whispered, his hand steady at the small of Claire's back. The warmth of his touch burned through the thin fabric of her shirt, a small flame of comfort amid overwhelming fear.
Focus on me.
Claire turned toward him, finding solace in his gaze. Even here, facing death or worse, she couldn't help noticing how his eyes caught the firelight, turning them to warm amber. A tendril of his dark hair had fallen across his forehead, and she reached up without thinking to brush it back. Her fingers lingered against his temple, tracing the strong line of his brow. For a heartbeat, they stood suspended in time, the horror surrounding them momentarily held at bay by something powerful growing between them.
In case we don't make it through this,
Archer said softly, his hand catching hers and pressing it against his cheek.
I need you to know that meeting you, even under these circumstances, has been the most unexpected gift of my life.
The simple honesty in his voice broke something open inside Claire's chest, releasing emotions she had kept carefully contained for years. His skin was warm beneath her palm, the slight roughness of evening stubble grounding her in this moment that felt both fragile and monumental.
I've spent years keeping people at a distance,
she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper.
but somehow you broke through all my defenses in days.
His smile was gentle, his thumb tracing circles against her wrist where their pulses seemed to beat in tandem.
Maybe some connections simply can't be explained.
Behind them, the creature that had been Dr. Garfield released a sound that wasn't quite human, a high, keening wail that made the stones beneath their feet vibrate. The chamber responded with another violent shudder, more ceiling collapsing inward.
Claire! Archer, now!
Preston shouted, desperation clear in his voice. Reality crashed back around them. Claire reluctantly pulled away from Archer, though she kept her hand firmly in his as they positioned themselves at the break in the circle. The ground beneath them had become slick with black liquid that seemed to resist their presence, sliding away from their feet as if alive.
The words,
Claire said, opening the journal to the marked page.
we have to speak them together. Our blood mingled, standing at the break in the circle.
Archer nodded, his expression shifting from tenderness to determination. He lifted their joined hands, blood still seeping from their matched wounds, and held them over the incomplete segment of the circle carved into the stone floor.
I, Archer Reed,
He began, his voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them.
acknowledge the pain inflicted by and upon my family in this place.
I, Claire Winters,
She continued, drawing strength from his presence beside her.
acknowledge the truth hidden by my family and choose to bring light to darkness.
Their joined voices seemed to gain physical presence in the chamber, pushing back against the encroaching shadows. The black liquid around Dr. Garfield's transformed body began to bubble and steam, as if their words caused it physical pain.
By blood freely given and truth freely spoken,
They recited together.
we close what was opened.
A drop of their mingled blood fell from their clasped hands, striking the exact point where the circle broke. The moment it touched stone, a blinding blue light erupted from the ground, racing around the circumference of the circle with impossible speed. The creature in the center shrieked, its many limbs thrashing against the sudden barrier of light. The chamber walls trembled more violently, large sections of ceiling giving way as the mountain itself seemed to protest against what was happening.
It's working.
Preston shouted, backing toward the stairs.
Keep going.
Claire felt Archer's arms circle her waist, pulling her closer as debris rained down around them. His body shielded hers instinctively, his warmth a stark contrast to the unnatural cold emanating from the center of the room. We bind you to your proper place, they continued, voices blending in perfect harmony.
Neither here nor there, but beyond the veil where you belong.
The blue light intensified, forming a dome over the circle. Inside, the creature thrashed more desperately, its form constantly shifting between Dr. Garfield's human shape and something ancient and terrible, something with too many limbs and eyes that had witnessed the birth of mountains. Claire felt power surge through her body, a tingling sensation that started where her blood mingled with Archer's and spread outward. The sensation wasn't unpleasant. Rather, it felt like recognition, like coming home after a long absence.
By the power of the Winter's Line, guardians of the threshold,
Claire spoke, the words coming to her as if whispered by generations past.
By the power of the Reed Line, keepers of ancient knowledge,
Archer added, seeming equally surprised by words he somehow knew.
We close the circle and seal the way.
They finished together. With those words, the blue light contracted violently, collapsing inward around the creature. Its shriek became deafening, a sound of rage and hunger denied. The chamber walls cracked, huge fissures spreading upward toward the cabin above. When they emerged into the snow minutes later, barely escaping the collapsing cabin, Claire found herself in Archer's arms. They lay together in the fresh powder, breathing heavily, watching as Whispering Pines Lodge, with all its secrets and horrors, collapsed into ruins. The mountain seemed to sigh around them, a sound of release after decades of holding its breath. In the sudden silence that followed, Claire became acutely aware of Archer beneath her, his arms still wrapped protectively around her body. His heartbeat thundered against her chest, his breathing ragged but steadying. Without thinking, she shifted slightly, bringing their faces level. His eyes met hers in the moonlight, reflecting starlight and something deeper. Snow continued to fall gently around them, delicate flakes catching in his dark eyelashes and hair.
we made it.
She whispered, her hand finding his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw with trembling fingers.
We did.
He agreed, his voice rough with emotion. His hand came up to cover hers, pressing her palm more firmly against his cheek.
Together.
Slowly giving her time to pull away if she wished, Archer leaned forward. His lips found hers with gentle certainty, the kiss soft at first. A question rather than a demand, Claire answered by melting against him, her fingers sliding into his hair as the kiss deepened. The taste of him, pine and smoke and something uniquely his, made her heart race faster than any danger ever had. His arms tightened around her, pulling her closer as if afraid she might disappear. The cold of the snow beneath them contrasted with the heat blooming between their bodies, creating a cocoon of warmth in the winter night. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Claire rested her forehead against his.
That was...
She began, struggling to find words adequate for what had just passed between them.
Just the beginning.
Archer finished, his smile visible even in the darkness. His thumb traced her lower lip with tender curiosity.
If you want it to be.
As they turned to lead the survivors toward safety, Claire cast one final glance at the ruins of Whispering Pines Lodge. A small flicker of blue light pulsed once from deep within the rubble before fading away completely. The sight brought not fear but certainty that whatever had been trapped beneath the mountain was finally at rest, and whatever was beginning between her and Archer, this man she had known for days but felt she had recognized instantly, was just starting to bloom.
Chapter 11. Redemption's Embers. Perfect timing.
1 year had passed since that night when fire and darkness had claimed the original lodge. 1 year since 6 strangers had faced an ancient evil beneath these mountains. 1 year since Claire had found herself falling for a man she'd initially suspected of murder. The snowflakes drifted like tiny white messengers from a slate-gray sky, each one perfect and fleeting. Claire watched them gather on the windowsill, forming a delicate ridge of white against the dark wood. Each flake represented a moment, gone as quickly as it arrived, yet part of something larger, something transformative. She turned from the window to survey the great room, transformed from the sight of their shared nightmare into something hopeful. Leather couches formed a semicircle around the fireplace where flames danced over cedar logs, casting a honeyed glow across the polished floorboards. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with volumes on healing and recovery. In the corner, a small kitchenette housed tea and coffee stations for the guests who would arrive tomorrow. The smell of pine and wood smoke mingled with the scent of cinnamon from the candles Archer had insisted on placing throughout the lodge. Comfort, he'd said, should engage all the senses. As always, he'd been right.
First snow right on schedule,
Archer Reed said, entering from the kitchen with 2 steaming mugs. He moved toward her with the easy confidence she'd come to cherish, his green eyes crinkling at the corners when he smiled.
Just like you predicted.
Claire took in the sight of him, tall and solid in his flannel shirt, dark hair slightly mussed as if he'd been running his fingers through it while working. A year ago, those green eyes had been guarded, haunted. Now they held a warmth that made her breath catch.
The mountains speak to me,
Claire replied, accepting the mug with a smile that still felt new and precious on her lips.
My grandfather taught me their language.
Did he teach you their secrets too?
Archer asked, his voice low and intimate.
Like how they've conspired to bring us here, to this moment?
Archer's fingers lingered against hers during the exchange, a deliberate touch that sent familiar warmth spiraling through her. After a year together, these small moments still caused her heart to quicken.
The mountains speak to you, and somehow you speak to me,
he said, stepping closer until she could feel the heat radiating from his body.
Still figuring out how that happened.
His scent, sandalwood and coffee and something uniquely him, enveloped her, as familiar now as her own. Claire studied him over the rim of her mug. Archer had changed in the past year. The permanent crease between his brows had softened. His shoulders no longer carried the weight of unresolved grief. The cabin had taken something from all of them, but it had given something back, too. A second chance.
Some mysteries are better left unsolved,
she teased, leaning into him slightly. The warmth of his body contrasted with the chill emanating from the window, creating a perfect balance, like everything about their relationship.
Is that what we are? A mystery?
His free hand found the small of her back, fingers splaying possessively. Claire tilted her head, pretending to consider.
Perhaps. The reclusive mountain guide and the tormented author, we do sound like characters in one of your novels.
My characters could never be as complex as you,
Archer murmured, his thumb tracing small circles at the base of her spine.
Or as maddening.
Maddening?
She raised an eyebrow, fighting a smile.
Completely.
His eyes darkened, pupils expanding as he looked at her.
In the best possible way.
Archer slipped his free arm around her waist, pulling her against his side as they both watched the snow through the window. More flakes had joined the first, tumbling from the darkening sky in an accelerating dance.
Is everything ready for tomorrow?
He asked, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her. Claire nodded.
The final cabin was stocked this morning. Preston sent over the welcome packages. Emerson finished installing the security system.
She paused, taking a sip of the tea Archer had prepared exactly how she liked it. A splash of milk, no sugar.
I still can't believe we're actually doing this.
Having second thoughts?
His question held no judgment, only concern. Claire shook her head, her hair brushing against his shoulder.
Not second thoughts. Just wonder, I suppose, at how life unfolds in ways you could never anticipate.
Whispering Pines Wilderness Recovery Center.
Archer said, his voice holding a note of pride she'd grown to love.
Has a good ring to it.
After the destruction of the original lodge, they'd made a decision that surprised everyone, including themselves. Instead of running from the site of their trauma, they'd chosen to reclaim it, with Preston Whitmore's financial backing and Emerson Hughes's unexpected technical expertise. They'd rebuilt the lodge and added 6 smaller cabins scattered through the surrounding forest. Tomorrow would bring their first group of participants, trauma survivors seeking healing in the wilderness. The irony wasn't lost on Claire. She had come to these mountains to escape her pain, only to face something far worse. Yet somehow that confrontation had cracked something hardened inside her.
When I first came here,
Claire said softly,
I was so hollow, so empty. I thought guiding strangers through the wilderness was a way to avoid connecting with anyone.
Archer set his mug on the windowsill, then gently took hers and placed it beside his own. His hands, now free, cradled her face with a tenderness that made her throat tighten.
And now?
He asked, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone.
Now I understand that true emptiness comes from trying to outrun your past,
she whispered,
from believing you have to face it alone.
His eyes searched hers, the green depths filled with understanding.
We're not alone anymore, Claire. That's the gift in all of this, in everything we went through.
When his lips found hers, Claire closed her eyes, giving in to the familiar warmth that sparked between them. His kiss tasted of bergamot and honey, of promises kept and new ones made. His thumb traced the line of her jaw as he deepened the kiss, and Claire felt herself melting into him, her hands sliding up his chest to rest against the steady beat of his heart. They broke apart at the sound of tires crunching on gravel outside.
That'll be Margot,
Claire said, reluctantly stepping back.
She promised to help arrange the welcome center before dinner.
Archer tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch lingering.
I still can't believe Broadway's legendary Margot Devereaux gave up her Manhattan penthouse to become our activities director.
The mountains have that effect on people,
Claire said.
They strip away pretense, show you what matters.
You have that effect too,
Archer said, his voice hushed with sincerity.
You've shown me what matters, Claire, every day since we met.
She moved toward the door, but Archer caught her hand, pulling her back for one more kiss. This one was quicker, but no less meaningful, a simple confirmation of their bond.
I'll finish setting up the dining hall,
he said, releasing her with obvious reluctance. Claire watched him cross the great room, admiring the confident set of his shoulders beneath his flannel shirt. A year ago, they'd been strangers thrown together by circumstance and ancient secrets. Now they shared not only a bed and a business, but a future they were building day by day. Outside, car doors slammed. Claire squared her shoulders and moved to greet Margot, but paused at the threshold to glance back at the lodge they'd created from ruins. Sunlight had faded completely now, leaving the great room illuminated by warm lamplight that pushed back the gathering darkness. A shiver passed through her, unexpected and swift. For just a moment, the shadows in the corners seemed to deepen, to move with purpose rather than following the flicker of firelight. The sensation of being watched prickled along her spine, a feeling she hadn't experienced since that night 1 year ago. Claire blinked, and the moment passed. The lodge was just a lodge again, beautiful in its simplicity, sturdy in its construction. Yet as she stepped outside to greet Margot, the sensation lingered like frost on glass, beautiful, temporary, but hinting at deeper cold.
Darling,
Margot called, emerging from her vintage Jaguar with characteristic drama. At 65, the former actress moved with the grace of someone half her age, silver hair swept into an elegant updo despite the wilderness setting.
Please tell me you've reconsidered the rustic decor in Cabin 3. That plaid sofa is an absolute crime against aesthetics.
Claire laughed, pushing away her momentary unease.
The plaid stays, Margot. We're going for Montana authentic, not Manhattan sophistication.
Margot clicked her tongue disapprovingly, but linked her arm through Claire's as they walked toward the main lodge.
You do realize I've turned down 3 film roles to be here?
She said, her dramatic sigh creating a cloud of vapor in the cold air.
Including one where I'd have played a Supreme Court justice with a secret past as a burlesque dancer.
Truly, your sacrifice humbles us all,
Claire said dryly. Margot squeezed her arm.
My point, darling, is that I'm committed to this venture, but that doesn't mean I can't advocate for better interior design choices.
Inside, Archer had already disappeared toward the dining hall, leaving them alone in the great room. Margot paused, her eyes scanning the space with professional assessment.
You've done something remarkable here,
she said, her usual theatrical tone softening into sincerity.
Catherine would have been proud.
The mention of Archer's aunt, whose death had set everything in motion decades ago, no longer brought the sharp pain it once did. Instead, Claire felt a gentle acknowledgement, as if Catherine's spirit had somehow found peace in their efforts to transform tragedy into healing.
I hope so,
Claire replied, squeezing Margot's arm gently.
There are moments when I swear I can feel her presence here. Not in a frightening way, but watchful, protective.
Margot's eyes, sharp and knowing beneath perfectly arched brows, studied Claire's face.
That night changed all of us, didn't it? Made us believe in things we'd have scoffed at before.
Do you regret coming to the mountains?
Claire asked.
Not for a moment,
Margot replied without hesitation.
I've spent decades pretending to be other people. It's rather refreshing at my age to finally discover who I actually am.
As they moved through the lodge, preparing welcome materials, Claire found herself repeatedly drawn to the windows, watching the snow accumulate on the ground outside. By dinner time, a pristine white blanket covered the clearing, reflecting moonlight with an almost blue luminosity. The dining hall looked magnificent. Archer had arranged the long table with candles and simple wildflower arrangements, the handcrafted wooden chairs positioned to encourage conversation. A cast-iron pot of venison stew simmered on the professional range, filling the air with savory warmth.
Our last dinner is just the 3 of us,
Archer said, pulling out Claire's chair.
Tomorrow, we officially become caretakers of other people's healing journeys.
Such a responsibility.
Margot mused, settling into her chair with characteristic elegance.
To guide others through the wilderness of their pain.
We're not guides,
Claire said, thinking of her former profession.
We're just fellow travelers who've been on the path a little longer.
To fellow travelers, then,
Archer proposed, raising his wine glass. The firelight caught in the ruby liquid, casting small red reflections on the polished table.
To new beginnings,
Margot countered with her own toast. They clinked glasses, the crystal singing in the quiet room. As Claire sipped her wine, she found herself studying Archer across the table. Candlelight caught in his dark hair, illuminating strands of silver that hadn't been there a year ago. Their shared trauma had marked him, as it had marked all of them. Yet there was peace in his eyes now, a certainty that had replaced the restless searching she'd first noticed in him. After dinner, Margot excused herself to drive back to her cabin in town, leaving Claire and Archer alone in the lodge that was both their home and their mission.
Walk with me?
Archer suggested, holding out Claire's coat.
The first snow deserves proper appreciation.
Outside, the world had transformed. Moonlight bathed the clearing in silver radiance, the fresh snow amplifying its glow until the night seemed almost as bright as twilight. Their boots crunched through the perfect blanket, leaving a trail of footprints that marked their passage.
Look at that,
Claire breathed, tilting her head back to watch the snowflakes drifting down through beams of moonlight. Each crystalline form sparkled as it descended, creating an effect like falling stars.
It's like the sky is sending us a gift.
Archer took her hand, their gloved fingers intertwining with practiced ease. They walked in companionable silence toward the tree line, where the forest stood like sentinels guarding the boundary between civilization and wilderness.
Do you remember,
Archer asked quietly.
what you told me that night in the cave, before we knew if we would survive?
Claire nodded, the memory vivid despite the terror that had surrounded it.
I said that if we made it out alive, I wanted to stop running, to find a place where I belonged.
And have you?
Archer's question hung in the frigid air between them, his breath creating small clouds that dissipated into the night. Claire stopped walking, turning to face him fully. Snow continued to fall around them, dusting his dark hair and the shoulders of his coat with white.
I've found more than a place,
She said softly.
I found my person.
The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, gradual, beautiful, inevitable.
I have something for you,
Archer said, reaching into his pocket and withdrawing a small wooden box, intricately carved with a pattern Claire recognized immediately.
The binding circle,
She whispered, tracing the design with her fingertip. The circular pattern matched the one that had been carved into the chamber floor beneath the original lodge, the circle they had closed to banish the ancient entity.
with one important difference.
Archer said, his voice tender in the quiet night.
This circle is complete. No gaps, no breaks.
Claire's heart stuttered in her chest as she opened the box. Inside, nestled on a bed of deep blue velvet, lay a ring. The band was white gold, set with a small diamond flanked by 2 emeralds that matched the color of Archer's eyes.
Archer!
She breathed, her voice catching. He took the box from her trembling hands and removed the ring, holding it between them. Snowflakes landed on his dark hair on the shoulders of his coat, transforming him into something magical in the moonlight.
A year ago, we closed a circle together and banished darkness.
He said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes.
I'm asking if you'll complete another circle with me, one that binds us together instead of pushing something away.
Claire felt tears warming her cold cheeks as he continued.
I've spent my life searching for answers about my family's past, about my aunt's death. I never expected to find my future in the process.
He took a deep breath, exhaling a cloud of vapor that hung between them in the frigid air.
Claire Winters, will you marry me?
The snow continued to fall around them, each flake unique and perfect. In the distance, an owl called once, twice, its voice carrying through the crystal air. The mountains stood silent witness, ancient and unchanging, as Claire placed her hands on either side of Archer's face.
Yes,
She whispered, the word creating its own small cloud between them.
1,000 times yes.
Archer's smile broke like sunrise as he slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms. Their kiss tasted of snow and wine and promises, of endings transformed into beginnings. Claire wound her arms around his neck, pressing herself against him as if to absorb his warmth, his strength, his love. When they finally broke apart, both breathless in the cold air, Archer pressed his forehead against hers.
I love you,
He said simply.
more than I thought possible.
I love you too.
She replied, the words still new enough to feel precious on her tongue. They stood together beneath the ancient pine, snowflakes dancing around them like celebratory confetti. Claire felt the weight of the ring on her finger, unfamiliar but right, like Archer himself had been from the beginning, once she'd allowed herself to see him clearly. The sound came so softly at first that Claire thought she'd imagined it. A whisper carried on the wind, words indistinguishable but tone unmistakable. She stiffened in Archer's arms, pulling back slightly to listen.
What is it?
He asked, immediately alert to the change in her posture.
Did you hear that?
She asked, scanning the dark trees behind him.
Archer
Turned, following her gaze into the forest.
Hear what?
The whisper came again, slightly louder this time, like multiple voices speaking in unison from the darkness beyond the trees. 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 Darkness beyond